Chapter 4966. The illusion was directly torn to pieces by Jiang Li, who was so angry, and Jian Wushuang was able to see the true whole picture of the sea of boundlessness ahead. I saw a giant tree that could no longer be called a tree, rooted at the bottom of the sea and bordering the sky, with an indescribable canopy, almost vast than a celestial plane. A strange fragrance also penetrated into the nasal cavity. This is a fairy laurel tree. A fairy laurel tree larger than a heavenly plane. In Jian Wushuang's memory, the world tree in Xiaodigen's Degyushan was not as grand as the fairy laurel tree right now. He saw it really, on the crown of the fairy laurel tree. There was an ancient fairy hall hidden in the clouds. Jiang Li, who was raging into the sky, directly hit the fairy palace in the broken illusion. Yen returned to the soul without possessing the body, but also hurriedly chased up. This ancient fairy hall lasted almost 9 days, lonely to the extreme. Jian Wushuang immediately stepped onto the fairy hall. On the vast fairy palace square, there are huge laurel trees growing. And on each fairy laurel tree, there is a quietly hanging round, emitting a hazy moon. Roughly counting, there will never be thousands of moons. The entire ancient fairy hall is shrouded in the brilliance of the moon, which is indescribable. At this moment, Jiang Li, who was raging into the sky, walked forward holding a true sword with a long and narrow blade. The square seemed to be rumbling as she stepped on it. The next moment, the originally closed palace door suddenly opened, and dozens of white clothes flew directly from the inside. Each of these white clothes is at the lowest level of rank 3, and they are listed in the front of the square one by one, and they look forward as if they are facing an enemy. Jiang Li didn't even look at them, and walked straight ahead. The one standing in the front with an old face and white clothes hurriedly shouted, "Stay aside. No one can go to the fairy palace without my fairy monarch's word. Get away if you don't want to die." Jiang Li whispered angrily. His violent sword intent was undoubtedly revealed at this moment. Lao Qingbai was taken aback when he heard the words. Obviously he did not expect the heroic woman in front of him to be so domineering. Seeing the terrifying aura on her body at another glance, Lao Qingbai gritted his teeth and stepped back and shouted in a low voice, "Forming." As his voice fell, dozens of white clothes all released their first blow at this moment. Their powers are connected to each other, forming an indescribable and magnificent ancient moon fairy formation. At this moment, the boundless strength of the power is fully displayed, and the vast ancient moon in the immortal array shoots out infinite strands of magnificence. The endless lunar blooming power surging out from every white-clothed body, purely and incomparably provide the fairy formation. This is an immortal formation that has assembled more than 10 rank 3 Dayan immortals with all their strength. Even a rank 6 Dayan immortal dare not look down upon it. But the most wrong thing is that they use the wrong object. An enemy of not only rank 9 Dayan immortal, but also sword immortal, can easily let them know what a miserable end is. If the girl is going further, don't blame us for being impolite. The old-faced Dayan immortal said in a deep voice. He seemed to be so confident in the power of the ancient moon fairy formation, that he spoke to remind Jiang Li. However, Jiang Li's expression was deep and cold, and he directly raised his sword and cut forward. A sword intent that is as prosperous as the sea slashed straight up. The sapphire square was plowed by this sword intent to plow a trail that was as wide as 1,000 feet, and the floor tiles were broken into dust. Seeing this shocking scene, all the white clothes took a breath of air, and then desperately input power for the fairy formation. However, the next moment, the sword intent that shook the sky and the earth directly cut away the Guyuesian formation. It was too easy and freehand. It was as easy as tearing open a piece of white paper, combined with the full strength of the 15 3-turn Dayan immortals, and even failed to save a breath of time. The sword intent smashed the dead, just broke the fairy formation, did not hurt a white robe, but shook them all out. The ultimate goal of the sword intent is that ancient fairy palace. At this moment, a black-haired white robe quietly walked out of the fairy hall, holding a real sword, his heroism and freedom to the extreme. Facing the real sword that came from the sky, the black cloth and white hair pulled out the real sword from its sheath, and brazenly confronted it. Countless sword intent swept from behind him, shocking the world. The two collided, and the whole broken square shook. Jian Wushuang also opened his eyes at this moment. Another sword fairy. In the entire vast and infinite DC domain, even Dian Immortal is an index, and Sword Immortal is just a legend. But in this boundless sea, Jian Wushuang saw 3 Dian Immortals one after another, and he was already shocked to the point where he couldn't speak. The difficulty of becoming a Sword Immortal is even beyond the concept of cultivation. You know, if you want to become a sword fairy, there is no mature system. Every swordsman can only explore slowly, and then create his own sword. But nearly 9 out of 10 swordsmen died on the way to create their own swordsmanship. Only the remaining swordsmen, who are far less than 10%, are qualified to yearn for the path of the sword fairy. There is no concept of cultivation as a result of practicing the sword. Yin Fan is an example. In order to become a sword fairy, he once wielded his sword for a Chinese year. A long year is enough to allow a monk who is in the beginning to climb into the realm of eternal fairy. But in this Chinese New Year, Yin Fan was only used to wield the sword, and the difficulty of becoming a sword fairy is evident from this. Blocking the sword intent with the sword intent. When the two were completely offset, the black-haired and white-clothed stood on the broken square again, retreating half a step without a trace on his right foot. It was this subtle scene that was caught by Jian Wushuang, and then he directly determined that this black-haired white robe was definitely not a sword fairy. A half-step retreat means that in the previous confrontation, there is not enough power, and a true sword immortal would never retreat half a step under that sword intent. But even though he is not the sword immortal, he is definitely only 1 line away from the sword immortal, infinitely close to the sword immortal. The world is silent. There is no more fight. www. Until novel. Calm. The real sword is in its sheath, and the iceberg-like face of black hair and white clothes slowly bursts into a smile. However, Jiang Li, who was originally full of anger, changed his face slightly at this moment, and his eyes were a little dodging. Good fellow, why is this old thing here? Yin Fan, who had a lively look on his face, was shocked, and hurriedly walked to Jiang Li, blocking the sight of the two. Ahem, I said that. It is not suitable to stay here for a long time. We should go. Yin Fan said with a taboo face. Jiang Li glared at him. Going? Yes, I will level the fairy palace first. After she finished speaking, she slapped Yin Fan and flew out, and walked forward. Long time no see. At this moment, the black hair and white clothes spoke, and the joy of reunion after a long time, and a trace of vicissitudes were hidden in the words. Jiang Li's complexion was a little more unnatural, but he quickly returned to normal. Chapter 4967. Then she said, Why are you in this place? The black-haired and white-clothed said again. It's been too long. I don't want to sleep any longer, so I got here as a company with my old friend. Jiang Li sneered. It's really leisurely and elegant. How's your life? The black-haired white robe asked immediately. Not so good. Get out of the way. My old lady is going to level this broken place. Jiang Li said in a deep voice, returning to his previous coldness. Yin Fan also hurried over at this time, first coughing deliberately, and then whispering, Madam will not get angry, let's go. The black hair and white clothes laughed, looked at him and said, Brother Yen, since we are all here, let's come in and sit down. We haven't talked together for many years. Yin Fan hurriedly rebuffed, That's not necessary. Let's go back to sleep, and we won't disturb your good things. After he finished speaking, he was about to take Jiang Li away. At this time, the fluttering and extremely charming voice came from the fairy palace. Leaving in such a hurry? You haven't done anything wrong with your heart, so why don't you even dare to sit here? Jiang Li instantly glanced at Yin Fan, who was about to flee. Yin Fan was shocked all over, then slowly turned around, righteously said, I haven't done anything wrong, but today I happen to be tired, so I won't come to bother. Jiang Li didn't bother to listen to his nonsense anymore, and directly took him into the fairy palace with strides. Yin Hu's face was ashen ashes, and shouted at Jian Wushuang. The disciples come and save me. Helpless, Jian Wushuang shook his head slightly, and walked into the fairy palace together. The fairy palace is vast, the clouds are vast, and a faint fragrance rushes out. giving people a sense of indescribable comfort. And under the scent of this delicate fragrance, the force in the meridians is recovering at an extremely slow speed. Walking in the back, Jian Wushuang roughly took everything in this fairy palace into his eyes. The fairy palace is simple and elegant, and everything built by when you has little decoration, but does not appear empty. Small stars and round moons the size of a palm are dotted in every space, making the whole fairy palace look like a flowing galaxy, extremely magnificent. Under the black hair and white clothes, Jiang Li angrily walked forward. At this moment, a whisper came into Jian Wushuang's ear from behind. It's really strange that there is actually a little Xiao Yangxian, who is also here. Should we blast him out? Why don't you see them? Is the relationship with us Xianjun very unusual? Shut up to me. Don't you think the things just now are not embarrassing enough? Don't blame me if anyone is talking. After being reprimanded by the old-fashioned white clothes, the gray-headed guys who were cut with a sword by Jiang Li stayed aside honestly, not daring to say anything. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly, and didn't take their words to heart at all. In this sea of boundlessness, his own strength could prove something more than what he said. As they entered, in the depths of this fairy palace, clouds began to float. Accompanied by this ethereal cloud and mist, there was an extremely gorgeous woman. Different from Jiang Li's domineering and heroic spirit, this extremely gorgeous woman has gentle brows and indescribably gentle and charming. Even Jian Wushuang rarely sees such a gorgeous and gentle woman. Just like a full moon, it means haziness. And holding a long-haired bunny in her arms adds a touch of softness and charm. Seeing this scene, Yan Fan's expression was extremely unnatural, but she still forced a smile. Then, all the white clothes in this fairy palace bowed their hands and said, I have seen Guangyue Xianjun. The gorgeous woman known as Guangyue Xianjun smiled slightly, and she reached out her hand to phantom thousands of clouds to hold them all up. Then, her gaze slowly swept over, and finally her gaze fell on Jiang Li and Yan Fan. Farewell last time, long time no see. Jiang Li didn't follow her practice. He stepped forward and said coldly, Why are we blocking our way? If you don't explain it today, don't blame me for flattening your broken palace. Facing her threat, Xianjun Guangyue couldn't help but chuckle. Sister Jiang Li, you are still as irritable as before. Crack. Jiang Li's hand holding the hilt of the sword at his waist suddenly squeezed, as if it was possible to hold the hilt out of water at any time. Madam, calm down your anger. Yan Fan said in a low voice, trembling slightly. Guangyue Xianjun smiled again. However, in my opinion, you are the only one who can hold Brother Yan's heart. Hearing this, Jiang Li's expression eased slightly, and his palm loosened the hilt. At this time, Yan Fan hurriedly said, Well, this is a misunderstanding. Now that the misunderstanding is solved, we won't stay here too much. What's the rush? Haven't seen you for so long. Don't you want to sit down and reminisce about the old? Jiang Li looked at him with a sneer. Sit down for me. Then, despite Yan Fan's whole body resisting, Jiang Li still sat down in front of the case. Jian Wushuang also took his seat, and was forcibly placed in the middle of the two by Jiang Li. The heroic middle-aged man with black hair and white clothes sat down next to Jiang Li. When they were all seated, Guangyue Xianjun also sat down, his eyes filled with joy that could not be concealed. The last time we left, we were still obscure monks, and now we are goodbye. After a few years, we have all become duplicity. Xianjun Guangyue was full of emotion. Although his face was extremely calm, his face was already quietly blushing. She let go of the little rabbit in her arms and patted her palms lightly, and then the next two columns of fairies, holding delicate silver pots, walked up on the clouds and mist, and then laid them down one by one. This is the lunar dew I survived after we separated. Now it's finally time for us to get together again. Jian Wushuang stared at it, and the silver jug poured out a cup of fermented rice, and suddenly a strong fragrance was released. Even if he was a bad drinker, he couldn't help swallowing his throat. There is no other reason, it is because this moon dew is too mellow. But after Yan Fan saw the moon dew in front of him, her saliva almost squirted out of control. Then he ignored Jiang Li's frustrated gaze, and directly took a long drink from the glass. Let's drink together. You know the moon dew of Guangyue brood. the black-haired white said with a smile, and poured a glass for Jiang Li. Jiang Li snorted coldly. Instead of touching the wine glass, he just picked up the wine jug with his mouth to the spout, and the cow drank boldly. The wine line was scented in the air. Looking at such a bold Jiang Li, Jian Wushuang and the black-haired white clothes were a little bit dumbfounded, and immediately picked up the wine glass and took a sip. Chapter 4968. The moon dew enters the throat and turns into the sweetest wine line, which penetrates the internal organs, making it indescribable and comfortable. But at the same time, this fine wine called Yuelu was extremely vigorous, and Jian Wushuang felt that the fairy body became hot after a cup. Putting down the wine glass, Jian Wushuang looked at the black-haired and white clothes, and found that he was already watching him. His eyes were facing each other, and the black-haired white robe smiled friendly at him. Jian Wushuang replied, and then continued to look straight. Good guy, it's really exciting. Yan Fan seemed unsatisfied, and simply put down the wine glass, and learned how to drink like Jiang Li. Not to be outdone, the black hair and white clothes also picked up a hip flask and started drinking. Ling Jian Wushuang was a little surprised that the soft and charming Guangyue Xianjun also changed his previous weakness, lifted the hip flask, and started groaning. In this way, the original tense situation turned into fighting each other. Out of curiosity, Jian Wushuang tried the weight of the jug, and couldn't help but slap his tongue. There are thousands of hidden inside this jug. Looking at the exquisite wine stored in it, no less than 100,000 caddies. If all these 100,000 caddies are lost, I am afraid Dianxian will be completely drunk. As time passed by, Jiang Li threw down the jug first, but it was empty, without a drop of fermented rice. It's so happy. Jiang Li's expression was not drunk at all, and satisfactorily retracted his feet on the case, and then sat back where he was. After a while, Yan Fan, black hair and white clothes, and Guangyue Xianjun all finished drinking the wine in the pot in turn, and their faces were more or less a little drunk. How are you doing these years? The black-haired and white-clothed looked at Jiang Li, and finally made up his mind to ask. Being exiled here, who can be happy? Yan Fan and I have been in a deep sleep, and we rarely wake up until today. Jiang Li said slowly. The black hair and white clothes were silent, but soon he looked at Jian Wushuang again and asked, then this one? Without waiting for Jiang to leave the mouth, Yan Hui immediately said excitedly, this is the disciple of the Sword Immortal, and he is an inexhaustible stunner. As soon as these words came out, Guangyue Xianjun's beautiful eyes turned towards Jian Wushuang. She is very clear about Yan Fan's pride. As Wanggu era, she used a sword to suppress the strong existence of Wanzhou Tianyu. Even the emperor wanted to draw him into his command. At that time, many Jinghong Tianjiao wanted to be his disciple, but he had never accepted one. Now that the years have passed, and when we meet again, there is an additional apprentice beside Yan Fan. How can she not be surprised? Hearing this, the black-haired and white-clothed could not help but smile. Oh, it seems that Brother Yan has a good vision. He is indeed a good seedling, but it is too much to say that it is Jinghong Tianjiao. How can Jinghong Tianjiao be a trivial one? The realm of eternal fairy? The fairy palace fell silent for a while. Jiang Li also looked upset at this moment. Songting, what do you mean? It's not interesting. I'm just correcting some problems. The black-haired white said with a faint smile. And Yan Fan, who was originally excited, also changed his expression, watching him say meaningfully, listening to what you said, it seems that you have received a disciple who is really shocking Hong Tianjiao? The black-haired and white-robed man named Song Ting said quietly. Almost, he has understood his own kendo, and he will come to the Sword Immortal in the future. Yan Fan couldn't help but chuckle. You guy, still like to joke like you did in the past. Your apprentice goes to the Sword Fairy? Don't be kidding. Only my apprentice can go to the Sword Fairy, okay? The fairy palace was silent. Songting looked at him and continued to whisper. Competition? Come on, whoever is afraid of who? Yan Fan said with disdain. Hurry up and let your apprentice come out, we are in a hurry. As his voice fell, a black dress walked out from the depths of the fairy palace. In this fairy palace, all dressed in white, it seemed extremely out of place. The black-clothed youth's gaze and complexion were all extremely calm, like a real sword with a completely hidden edge, which made people absolutely unable to see through. And with his appearance, that calm gaze also locked Jian Wushuang for an instant. Turn 3 Dian Immortal. When Jiang Lian returned to both, he also knew why Chang Ting was so confident. His apprentice had already reached the level of the third revolution. Rank 3 is already a qualitative change. Not to mention that he has realized his own swordsmanship. Even facing rank 6 Dian Immortal, he has enough power to fight. It's really tricky, Yan Fan murmured in a low voice, then quickly approached Jian Wushuang, and then lowered his voice. Good apprentice, my face is all on you this time. It's all up to you. Up. I'm afraid this is not so good. I don't want to do it too much, Jian Wushuang said with a wry smile. Good apprentice, we must save me and hit this old man in the face fiercely, Yan Fan said in a low voice, almost kneeling before Jian Wushuang. Finally, Jian Wushuang nodded and said, Then I will give it a try. Yan Fan immediately burst into flames and almost jumped onto the table. My disciple has already agreed, so I'm ready to start. Song Ting was startled when he heard the words. He did not think that Yan Fan did not flinch but challenged. Are you crazy? See clearly that my disciple is the third-ranked Dian Immortal. Just being oppressed by the force of growth is enough to make your disciple stand upright. Yan Fan snorted. Stop talking nonsense. This sword immortal will let you take a look today. What is the real shocking talent? Jian Wushuang slowly got up. Zhang Li on the side grabbed him and said in a low voice, Don't try hard. Stop in time if you feel uncomfortable. Don't worry, it's okay. He smiled slightly and stood in the center of the fairy palace. After seeing this scene, Xianjun Guangyue, who had originally planned to prevent it, had to give up, and at the same time she was sweating for Yan Fan. Yan Xian dealt with the first 3 rounds of Dian Xian, which has been the result of no suspense since ancient times. And there has never been any act of Yan Xian to counterkill. Even the most shocking Tianjiao is impossible. Could it be that all the previously fixed thinking will be subverted today? Song Ting gritted his teeth secretly. This extremely unequal battle, even if his apprentice won, it would never be too glorious. After all, the gap between Yan Xian and Dian Xian cannot be made up at all. With eyes facing each other, the black-clothed youth who looked like a hidden front was waiting to start, suddenly said, You are very powerful. You are different from all the swordsmen I have seen. Your sword intent is too pure, as if you have experienced the temper of blood and fire. Hearing these words, Jian Wushuang's original calm state of mind could not help but ripples. In this very short period of time, he could guess the characteristics that Jian Wushuang wanted to hide. He was definitely a terrifying existence. Chapter 4969. Wushuang Kendo, born out of the supernatural universe. It is the ultimate kendo inspired by the old man who guards the tomb of the gods in the depths of the universe. From now on, it was Jian Wushuang's strongest sword. When the whole kendo is fully integrated, he will instantly become a sword fairy. And all the sword intent of Jian Wushuang basically comes from Wushuang Kendo. Wushuang Kendo has indeed undergone the tempering of blood and fire before it can grow to this day. All of these were guessed by the black-clothed youth at this moment, and Jian Wushuang had to be shocked and wary. After speaking those words, the black-clothed youth directly squeezed the hilt of the sword at his waist. The aura of the whole figure was completely restrained. He said in a deep voice, So next I will go all out. Don't think that I will lower my strength to fight you, including the Yanli realm, and I will not lower it a bit. Jian Wushuang nodded and said quietly, Of course I can, and I won't hide my strength. The black-clothed youth said, That's it. As the last word fell, thousands of sword intent suddenly emerged from his feet. The sword intent is like a changhong, running through the heavens and the earth, making the entire fairy palace in shock. Immediately afterwards, the Guangyue Xianjun sitting on the jade seat waved and lowered the endless moon flower, which directly turned into a barrier, enclosing the two. With this enchantment as the center, a martial arts field was formed, allowing them to let go of their hands and feet in this battle, without destroying the fairy palace. Song Ting, who was black and white, couldn't help expressing satisfaction when seeing this scene. The disciple under his seat was really amazing. Only the sword intent released from him formed a force of overwhelming pressure, almost immediately controlling the entire aura. In the competition between swordsmen, the first moment of the sword is extremely important. The so-called starting point, in a way, can already establish the battle. Song Ting immediately looked at Yin Fan again, and saw that instead of worrying about him, he looked at this scene with a smile, and couldn't help feeling angry. This battle, even if it was won, was extremely disgraceful. Thinking of this, Song Ting couldn't help but sneered. Knowing that you are defeated, you want to fight. Your master really does not care about the life and death of your apprentice. If my apprentice starts harder, I'm afraid I won't have to tell the winner. Yin Fan's face instantly became cold when he heard the words, but then returned to normal. It's a wishful thinking to use your disciple, your inexperienced kendo, to hit my disciple hard. Oh, are you so confident? Song Ting said playfully. When did this sword immortal not be confident? Yin Fan said, stepping directly on the case, proudly speaking out a shocking word. If my apprentice doesn't beat your apprentices today, then your apprentice will be considered clean today. Crudeness means being too crude. The fairy palace was dead, and all the white clothes were twitching at the corners of their mouths, including the Guangyue Xianjun sitting on the jade seat. Yin Fan, you are presumptuous. Song Ting smashed the case made by Xian Guishu with a hard shot, and straightened up, his face sinking like water. This is a naked humiliation. If it were not in the fairy palace, he would have already taken the sword. Yin Fan said with her lips, I'm not presumptuous. Why, can't you tell the truth now? You are so confident that your apprentice will win. Why? I don't believe that my disciple wins. Do you believe that your disciple wins? Then how about some more conditions? Song Ting tried his best to suppress his anger. What conditions? Yin Fan said, raising his eyebrows. Song Ting said coldly, if my disciple wins, your kendo belongs to me. If your disciple wins, my kendo belongs to you. How about? Without waiting for Yin Hui to speak, Guangyue Xianjun, who was sitting on the top of the jade seat, had a solemn expression and repeatedly stopped him. No, this condition is absolutely not allowed. I think this condition is not bad, but I have to add something to this condition. Yin Fan smiled quietly. If my disciple wins, then tell your disciple the secret of how to reach Dian Fairyland. Song Ting was startled, his expression slightly unnatural, but in the end he agreed. Once this condition is settled, it can't be changed. It is no use for Guangyue Xianjun to be worried and angry. And the reason why she was worried and angry was completely because these two rivals actually gambled out their own swords for this competition between apprentices. This is really fatal. After reaching the point of sword immortal, or even quasi-sword immortal, the competition between them is a matter of life and death. Often just one start is enough to determine life and death. As the original swordsmanship of the sword immortal, once it is fully known by evenly matched opponents, there is only one dead end. These two seemingly unremarkable conditions are the fate of a sword fairy and a quasi-sword fairy. This is what makes Guangyue Xianjun nervous and dignified. And she has also made a decision in her heart. No matter what the final result, she will not let the two show the sword. Jian Wushuang and the young man in black, who were completely enveloped by Yuehua, did not hear any conversation from outside. In their eyes and ears, there is only each other. At this moment, the breath revealed by the black-clothed youth was completely different from the one previously released, vigorous and vigorous. This made Jian Wushuang as if he was not facing a swordsman, but a sword, an épée without a blade and a sheath. Next, let him be more certain of his thoughts. The young man in black drew a sword from behind, a dark épée. It can't be described with a sword anymore. It can be described with a heavy ruler, or even an iron plate. Without a sword edge, it was like a heavy ruler. Jian Wushuang had solemn eyes, and everyone who could use this épée sword was a swordsman, who had tempered his sword to the pinnacle. The épée has no edge, and the skill is not working. Without the sword's edge, it has more lethality. Jian Wushuang can even be sure that Chang Yinxian can't even take this sword. At this moment, the young man in black seemed to be completely integrated with the épée in his hand, and his eyes became completely black. The greatest respect for you is to let you kneel under my sword. Jian Wushuang shrugged, and an invisible sword condensed in his right hand at this moment. This is the visualization of Wushuang Kendo, with sword patterns slowly circulating. Song Ting, who had been watching this scene from afar, looked a little dignified. No sword is invisible, this kid is not easy. But Yan Fan was so proud. His chin was almost up to the sky. He once had a brief discussion of swords with Jian Wushuang. Although there were only 2 swords, he truly felt the aura of real swordsmanship. I may be able to beat you, an old thing, my disciple, let alone your disciple who is not as good as you. Chapter 4970. Yan Fan secretly proudly said in his heart that in his current cognitive considerations, Jian Wushuang and Song Ting were already side by side. Under Jianxian he has no rivals. In the Yuehua barrier, the black-clothed youth was the first to leave at this moment. He held the heavy sword high in both hands, and his whole figure was like a gloomy light, crushing towards Jian Wushuang. Zhang, struggle! Jian Wushuang confronted him brazenly, and the invisible sword in his hand directly blocked his heavy sword. As soon as the sword came out, the black-clothed youth fully used every inch of the meridian in the fairy body, twisted the huge and incomparable heavy sword in his hand, and smashed it again. Sparks overflowing. Endless sword intent swept out, swallowing Jian Wushuang from all directions. At this moment, the black-clothed young man seemed to be tempering a sword embryo. A sword heavier than a sword hit Jian Wushuang's invisible sword. The entire Yuehua enchantment was covered by overflowing sparks. There was a satisfying smile at the corner of Song Ting's mouth, and everything seemed to be a foregone conclusion. Yan Fan didn't feel nervous because of this, but was still smiling, as if not worried. On the contrary, Xianjun Guangyue was the most nervous. and seemed to be ready to stop the two fighting. But the originally silent fairy palace began to whisper, "Who do you think can win these two?" Is it necessary to say? It must be the disciple of the Tsongting immortal sovereign seat who won. You haven't seen his kendo. Good guy. Even the same realm Dian immortals can't get close to him. Yes, that immortal is definitely not good. It is not easy to be able to survive until now. If you continue to fight, you will probably vomit blood. In the Yuehua barrier, under the rushing sword intent, the black-clothed youth has completely entered the state. But in just a few dozen breaths, he has drawn out 90,000 swords. However, what made him a little surprised was that Jian Wushuang actually resisted all of them under these 90,000 swords. How can that be? Have you squeezed enough? A voice sounded quietly. The black-clothed youth was startled. What? His response was a heavy kick. Boom! Under this foot, he flew upside down for 100 feet, and only after knocking out a crack in the Yuehua barrier, he was able to stop his body. Jian Wushuang retracted the kicked right foot, shook his wrist and said coldly, "If you are tickling like this, I think it can be over." What? The black-clothed youth's figure was shocked, and the 90,000 swords he squeezed out with all his strength were only tickling in his eyes? You are looking for death. He burst into tears, and million sword intent burst out of the fairy body at this moment. Then, these million sword intents condensed into a huge treasure behind him, almost breaking the entire Yuehua barrier. Danga sword Dao dash, as the black-clothed youth screamed. The huge treasure behind him also moved, slashing down with a huge épée in both hands. Jian Wushuang, who was standing still on the spot, felt that the top of his head was covered. He couldn't avoid it, and could only face this ancient sword. At this moment, Wu Jinying directly blessed. Jian Wushuang did not release Wushuang sword, but used the flowing cloud grass sword style. As another kendo, the whole spectrum of Luyan grass sword style represents vigor and exuberance, which can protect Jian Wushuang from any serious damage to the maximum. Luyan grass sword style 7th style. The grass leaves turn green. The endless emerald green sword intent rises into the sky, turning into blades of grass, brazenly facing the ancient sword. At this moment, even the Yuehua barrier began to be filled with cracks. Good boy, you have split this sword. Instead of choosing to fight it hard, it's amazing. Yan Fan muttered in a low voice. His appreciation was beyond words. Chapter 4971. When the Kendo Tianhe was completely suspended above the entire fairy palace, it directly stopped flowing, as if it had solidified. In the next moment, the Kendo Tianhe burst into pieces, and the endless stream of light spilled over the entire fairy palace. All the white clothes looked at the dome of the fairy palace, and were shocked again. I saw under the dome, as the sword Tianhe dissipated, two figures appeared. The sword has no double face color as usual, as indifferently as if nothing had happened. But at this moment, his right arm stretched out against the heart of the black-clothed youth. The exposed fairy body of the black-clothed youth was densely covered with scars, and drips of divine blood poured out from the wounds, which was difficult to stop. He looked at Jian Wushuang in disbelief. His face looked like ashes. If the fingers that touched his heart were replaced by a real sword, he would have disappeared and the fairy body would be broken. Time seemed to stagnate. Jian Wushuang retracted his palm, did not say a word, and then fell on the ground of the fairy palace. At this moment all the white clothes, as well as Tsongting and Guangyue Xianjun, looked at Jian Wushuang together, all in disbelief. With the power of cultivating immortals, it was beyond imagination to win an all-out 3-tier Dian immortal so easily. Yan Fan grabbed Jian Wushuang and laughed. Awesome! Tsongting sat back where he was, with a look of despair. Afterwards, the young man in black also fell from midair, looking at Jian Wushuang with a complex expression. He seemed to be still immersed in that scene, and he hadn't recovered from his fears. He could never think that he would lose, and there was no room for defeat. How Tsongting, who wins and who loses? Yan Fan turned to look at the desperate Tsongting, and asked with a smile. Tsongting slowly raised his head and stared at him, before saying for a while, "I lost, and I will give you what you want now." After he finished speaking, he directly stretched out his hand and flipped it, and immediately a series of ancient incomprehensible sword patterns emerged from his palm. This is Kangding's kendo. But the kendo he released only appeared for a moment, even if Xian was directly dispelled by a force. Song Ting raised his head and looked at Yen Fan with a smirk. Okay, let's say it's a decent old friend. I don't want to copy your old friend. Besides, do you think I am coveting your kendo? How do I say it is also a sword fairy, okay? I just want to show off my apprentice to you today. Having said that, Yen Fan couldn't help laughing out loud anymore. But Song Ting's complexion changed several times, and in the end only helplessness remained. Guangyue Xianjun, who rushed over, also shook his head helplessly. The free and easy middle-aged man in front of him seemed to be the same as before, without any change. It's all right, the wine is drunk, the words are spoken, and the fight is done, we should go. Yen Fan waved his hand and said, We still have things to do, so we want chat with you. Up. Hold on, just leave like this. Song Ting said coldly, making the atmosphere of the entire fairy palace fall into silence again. Then he cleared his throat and said again, Guangyue, don't keep it, move out all the remaining moon dew. There is not a drop left if you don't drink today. No one wants to leave. Okay, don't give it away. I may see you when it's okay. It's just like our relationship. Standing on the fairy palace square, Yen Fan waved his hand and said, in order to avoid Guangyue Xianjun's scorching hot gaze, his whole figure almost shrank behind Jian Wushuang. Xianjun Guangyue narrowed his gaze to the bottom of his eyes, then came to Jian Wufang, looking at him with elder eyes. Jian Wushuang raised his mouth unnaturally. Then Guangyue Xianjun directly stretched out his hand and raised his right arm, placing an object in his palm. You are his apprentice. This is the meeting gift I give you. It is very useful to open it later on the occasion of life and death. In the palm of the palm, there is a full moon with hazy moonlight, which is extremely beautiful. Jian Wushuang couldn't laugh or cry, but didn't refuse the kindness of Emperor Guangyue, so he solemnly put it in his arms after thanking him. And Song Ting and Yen Fan went side by side, walking in the forefront. You have accepted a good apprentice whose future achievements are never below you, and it will only be a matter of time before you reach the Sword Fairy. Yen Fan smiled when he heard the words. My goal is not only to get him to the Sword Fairy, maybe to advance to a more difficult-to-guess realm. So confident? Song Ting looked at him. Yen Fan sighed slightly, and then said, It's not that I am confident, but that he convinced me that his future is more than just a Sword Fairy. Do you know why I was calm after he defeated your apprentice? Why? Because I know he can easily defeat your apprentice, and even behead it instantly. It's also because I will target him, not your apprentice but you. With the concentration of Tsongting, Rao was shocked after hearing such shocking words. Do you know what you're talking about? I'm the ninth ranked Dian Immortal, and am only one line short of climbing the Sword Immortal. Even if I'm not against you, I won't be far worse. Yen Fan sighed again. I know, but I still don't change my opinion, because I've discussed kendo with him before this. He blocked one of my swords, and did it effortlessly. Song Ting took a deep breath. What you said is true. Although I don't have much truth, this sentence is absolutely true. Song Ting sighed faintly. If this is the case, I can no longer guess where his future will be. We can't see so far, the only thing we can do is to act as a guide. Yen Fan looked into the distance, thinking. By the way, you old boy haven't told me what's the realm of your apprentice. I saw at a glance that he was taking something, and was promoted to Dian. Song Ting smiled. Sure enough, nothing can escape your eyes. Yes, I did give him a kind of fruit that contains great luck. Yen Fan was completely shocked. I'm going. What Jiguo would be so defying that it can help break through the realm? He was full of pride. I will call it Hunyuan without sea fruit for the time being. Hunyuan no Haigua? What kind of name? Sounds so cheap. Ahem, be careful when you speak, this is what I call it. I knew it was you, old boy, who obviously didn't have a high style, and had to pretend to be unpredictable. Having such a strange name has brought down the overall grade. Damn it, I won't say anything. Don't stop, you go on. Let me see if I can try a few hundred for my apprentice. Are you a mud pill? Do you want to try out hundreds of them? the ultimate fruit that contains supreme fortune. You can get another one if you can't help it. Chapter 4972. After learning that the so-called Hunyuan Waheguo was born in a place called the Domain of No Seas, Yin returned with great interest. After directly setting out the real address of the domain without sea, he hurriedly took Jian Wushuang with him, preparing to go to the domain without sea. Remember, that Sifri territory is a little weird. I was almost trapped when I brought my disciples into it. But with your 2-sword celestial guards, there should be no major problem. Song Ting's gaze was a little dignified. Yen Fan waved his hand. I know, I will be careful. When he was about to leave this Guiwei Immortal Palace, suddenly a figure ran out of the Immortal Palace, his expression tense and firm. Looking at the figure about to go away, the young man in black said loudly, Can I ask your name? I want to write it down and fight with you again in the future. Jian Wushuang stopped where he was, and the corner of his mouth pulled out a radiant, Jian Wushuang. The 3 bodies were like stars and streamers, coming and going in a hurry, and disappeared into the boundless sea in a flash. Jian Wushuang. I took it down. The black-clothed youth murmured, his eyes finally firm. Putting away his sullen expression, Song Ting looked at his disciple, and his pride was revealed without any cover. Lao Tzu's disciples are not bad either. I really want to see how they will grow by then. At this moment, Xianjun Guangyue lacked the kind of hazy moonlight that couldn't be looked at directly, and was a bit more lonely. Her thoughts seemed to have returned to that too long time. Sometimes endless longevity may not be a good thing for Yinxian. The countless ancient battles and nihilistic years have made them think about the ultimate meaning of existence. After leaving the Guiwei Immortal Palace, there has been no news about Diqing. Although this is only a short period of time, Jian Wushuang is also more worried. You must know that the longer the timeline is, the possibility of finding a clear truth will expand indefinitely. Because the entire borderless sea has no boundaries, it is almost equivalent to a universe, and the difficulty of finding a Dian in such a universe full of fatal dangers can be imagined. Originally Jian Wushuang wanted to continue looking for Diqing aimlessly, but was directly led by Yen Fan on his way to the realm of no sea. Good disciple, you just follow us. I paid a lot of money to get this news from the old boy in Songting. You can be sure that you will become Dian immortal after eating that kind of Hunyuan without sea fruit. Seeing Yen Fan, who was very excited, Jian Wushuang felt a little helpless. Climbing into the realm of Dian immortal from Yanxian is a difficult and almost impossible thing. How could there be some kind of fruit that contains atmospheric luck, which can have such an unimaginable effect against the sky? You must know that even the former emperor of the 6 Crow Emperors did not have such a treasure of promotion. Therefore, Jian Wushuang did not hold much hope and confidence in this. A realm without seas, there are places in this sea without seas that are not seas. It's not that this old kid fooled me again. As he continued to move forward, Yen Fan began to doubt the real position that Songting gave him. Jiang Li said at this moment, Of course there is. You have to know that in this borderless sea, there is something that will not sink in the sea, and will not be swallowed by any force. You mean the corpse of Yen Xian? Yen Fan touched his chin. If that is the case, then Hunyuan Waheguo might have been born in that place. Jiang Li curled his lips, showing no trace of disgust. What kind of ghost name so weird? Yen Fan touched his nose. I also think it's amazing, but as long as you can rise to the realm of Dian immortal, it will be a good fruit. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly when he heard the words. He knew his own situation best. He had realized before that there was no source of immortality, and he could hardly reach the realm of Dian immortal. This is why, even if he is extremely proficient in the use of the immortal style, and realizes the strong sword, he cannot be promoted to Dian immortal. Without the reason of Xian Yuan, Jian Wushuang's promotion journey was completely blocked. But he still has the last ray of hope. If Hunyuan Waheguo can really allow him to enter the realm of Dian immortal, then he will be able to easily crush rank 6 Dian immortal. So he also looks forward to it. With 2 true sword celestial beings following them, they moved forward at a speed of 10,000 li in a flash, almost able to traverse a celestial domain in a few breaths. This is the case. It took a long time to travel to the land without sea. When the endless black sea in front of him was replaced by the gray-white land plain, even with Jian Wushuang's concentration, he couldn't help but be surprised. Those that make up the gray-white land plain are not other things but messy bones. The endless bones, shrouded in a unique barren dead breath, make the viewer's heart palpitations involuntarily. This is simply a scene left only by a great battle between the ancients. And the land plain composed of endless fairy bones is even wider than the heaven and land plain, where the frontier was located. After seeing this scene, even Yin Fan couldn't help but slap his tongue. Good fellow, how many deaths did you form here? It's really magnificent. Be careful, there may still be living things here. Jiang Li frowned slightly. Are you sure that Hunyuan no Haiguo is here? Yin Fan nodded affirmatively, and then pointed to the front. Absolutely here, you see here. There is no order and heavenly restrictions. Yanli is in a state of chaos and unknown, which is quite in line with the meaning of Hunyuan, the old man of Tsangting. The kid sums it up well. Looking around, Jian Wushuang soon felt that what Yin Fan said was not unreasonable. You read The Land of Okanshu, which is made up of endless bones of immortals, is already a land of no heaven and chaos. Let's go find the fruit first, this little corpse field is nothing. Yin Fan said, and flew to the sealess area first. You are walking behind me. No matter what crisis you encounter, don't do it yet. Jiang Li also walked forward after an exhortation. Jian Wushuang nodded, and then stepped into this sealess realm, after he was covering his entire body with his strength. Step into it with one step, and the unknown and chaotic power will come. The strength of a sword, like a sword, kept cutting the strength of the surface of the fairy body, causing Jian Wushuang to feel a slight discomfort. Seeing his discomfort, Jiang Li casually dispelled the chaos around Jian Wushuang, and formed a barrier around him with his sword intent, before he stopped. Thank you. Jian Wushuang solemnly thanked him. Hearing this, Jiang Li raised his eyebrows slightly, and said with a faint smile, Remember, I will call my wife in the future. Chapter 4973. Then, before he could react, Jiang Li turned and walked forward. Rubbing his nose, Jian Wushuang followed up immediately. The endless bones of the immortal underneath. I don't know how long it has been gone. There is no fairy rhyme. And it is full of death and desolation. Looking around, they were all Yinxian bones, and there was no other living aura. But the more so, the more vigilant it is. This is an unbreakable truth. Yin Fan walked in the forefront. He was so lazy as usual. It seemed that he didn't care about all crises. And one of these details made Jian Wushuang close his eyes. It was the Yinxian bones under his feet. None of them received any trauma, and they were preserved intact. You know, this is almost impossible in the borderless sea. If you want to build a land on the borderless sea, you must kill the immortals and use their bones as land. And this naturally can't avoid conflict. As long as there is conflict, the bones of the fairy will be incomplete. But from the point of view of the moment, these fairy bones were too complete, as if they had died voluntarily. This faintly made Jian Wushuang feel something wrong, but he didn't know what was wrong. Strange, why didn't I feel the breath of that fruit? Yin Fan asked with his chin in doubt. They had been stepping into this sealess area for a period of time. If there is that kind of air transport fruit that has the anti-sky effect, I am afraid that it is absolutely impossible to hide the breath. This is why Yin Fan is strange. But shortly after he said this, an unimaginable rich breath followed. That kind of rich aura contained unimaginable atmospheric luck, which made Jian Wushuang unable to calm down for a moment. Good guy just ahead. Yin Fan was overjoyed. The old boy in Tsangting didn't lie to me. I'll follow and get the fruits as soon as possible. Jian Wushuang nodded and galloped forward without any hesitation. No matter what the final result is, he must seize this opportunity. After all, he has no way to break through the realm of Dian Immortal, so he can't give up any chance. When they came to the very center of the entire sealess realm, the thing that contained the supreme atmosphere of luck, they could see thoroughly. It was an unimaginable and extremely huge towering tree. The brown branches, the emerald green tree cover, and even the cinnamon tree that had previously supported the entire Guiware mortal palace were huge. And the supreme atmosphere that is so rich that it can hardly be removed, it is flowing from the towering giant tree. Good fellow, it seems that this fairy tree bears more than one fruit, Yan Fan said with a smile, seeming to be extremely satisfied. Then he watched Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and smiled. Apprentice, see the teacher pick a few hundred for you today to try it out. Without waiting for Jian Wushuang to answer, Yan Fan's figure flashed straight forward. But the feeling of anxiety in Jian Wushuang's heart became even stronger. As if to prove his idea, when Yan Hui urged him to go to the fairy tree, the fairy corpse under his feet suddenly shook. Then the fairy corpse instantly cracked, and thousands of huge tree roots were drilled from under the center of the earth. Each root of the tree is so huge that it can't be added. Even a real dragon can't compare with it. The roots of these trees were all besieged to Yan Fan in the first place. But Jiang Li seemed to have foreseen long ago, and suddenly drew his sword. This was the only second time Jian Wushuang saw Jiang Li's shot, and the first shot in front of the Guiware mortal palace. Although it was only a single blow, it surprised all Dian immortals. And this time, Jiang Li quickly drew a long sword from his waist and cut straight forward. Although there was only one blow, 1,000 sword intents were instantly differentiated. Every one is the strongest sword intent. Nearly 1,000 sword intents slashed forward, smashing the giant tree roots into pieces in an instant. Yan Fan had already reacted, reaching out his hand, and completely shattered the remaining roots. But then, a more majestic force burst out from the whole body of the fairy tree, and forced Yan Fan back. Those who covet my fruit die. A sound that shook the sky and the earth followed from the fairy tree, and then the branches split, exposing a huge mouth. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang was slightly shocked. Such an immortal tree, which was fed by countless celestial bones, surged into an unimaginable general trend. This general trend, even beyond the power of rank 6 Dian Immortal, has the power of rank 9. Yan Fan slapped his lips. Good fellow, I said why the old man in Songting had to persuade me to be vigilant. It turns out that this strange tree has reached rank 9. Jiang Li pursed his lips. Is that the reason for you? I'll persuade. I'm a sword immortal, okay? Yan returned with anger and didn't fight. Dare you look down on me? Jiang Li raised his head and nodded the fairy giant tree in front of him with his chin. Go and chop it down, and prove yourself in front of me and the disciple. Okay, Jiang Li wait for you. Yan Fan resented, then rushed forward angrily. Those who covet my fruit die. The fairy giant tree made a sound that shook the sky and the earth again, and then twisted the root of the tree, which was bigger than the real dragon, and smashed it towards Yan Fan. Yan Fan, who was angry, did not draw his sword, but pointed it out directly. Thousands of sword intents were swept out in an instant, and the tree roots were easily crushed into powder. Are you going to hand it over by yourself, or wait for me to cut you into 2 pieces, and find out by yourself? Yan Fan said coldly. The fairy giant trees whose roots were cut one after another seemed to have tasted pain, and the crown of the tree that was so huge that it bordered the sky began to shake. But it also seemed to be extremely angry, and the huge mouth on the branch said wildly, Today, I am dead, and I will never give up a Taoist fruit. I will turn you all into nourishment. It's really noisy. Yan Fan picked her ears, and then rushed forward. Next is an extremely shocking scene. A fight that was almost one-sided, and without any suspense began. Facing a real sword immortal, and the realm of Dian Immortal of rank 9. This immortal giant tree was destined to be a giant sandbag. The broken roots, the torn-apart tree canopy, the wailing that almost never stopped, walked in the center of the entire fairyland. After hitting the back, Jian Wushuang couldn't bear it. The fate of this fairy giant tree was really miserable, but it was indeed hard-spirited. Apart from howling, he didn't even ask for mercy. Just as Yan Fan was about to cut off the waist of the giant sloth, a voice resounded like a gossamer, but panic. Don't fight. I give it to you, I give it all to you. Say it early, and it's going to be all right. I have to take you apart before I will hand it over. Chapter 4974. Yan Fan murmured dissatisfiedly, and then retracted his palm. Hurry up. Give me as many as you need. 180 are not too many. If you dare to give me one, I will have to tear down you today. The immortal giant tree was dying, and when he heard this he wailed again. 180, were you mud pills at that time? This is the Tao fruit that I bear, and only one can be born every other year. He scratched his head when he heard the words. Then you have to hand over as many as you have. My apprentice will be promoted today. If the promotion is successful, your benefits will be indispensable. Well, I only have 2. Even if you destroy me today, there are only 2. The fairy giant tree said, dying. Yan Fan didn't bother to listen to his nonsense, and directly kept beckoning. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang and Jiangli looked at each other, then swept over. Then, under the miracle of Yan Fan's great strength, the forcing fairy giant tree spit out 2 palm-sized fruits in succession. The moment the emerald green fruit appeared, the space of hundreds of millions of miles was filled with unimaginable luck. This kind of air luck actually began to slowly construct the rules of heaven when it swayed through the air. Strands of dense ancient patterns flow quietly in the air, so that the original desolate and silent aura disappears without a trace. Yan Fan and Jiangli said anxiously at the same time, swallow it. Jian Wushuang, who had originally wanted to reject it, had to cheeky, picking up a fruit of luck and swallowing it directly. In the next moment, the fruit of luck directly turned into 1,000 radiant flowers, flowing down his throat and into his limbs. Okay. A tyrannical force that could not be added suddenly broke through all the obstacles in his meridian and began to circulate back and forth. At the same time, wisps of divine blood burst out from every pore of his fairy body, and in a flash, bleeding fog came. Jian Wushuang hurriedly sat cross-legged to thoroughly digest and absorb the air transport in the body. Seeing this scene, Yan Fan couldn't help but smile. Yes, it seems that promotion to Dian Immortal is already a sure thing. Jiangli also nodded slightly. They were extremely optimistic about Jian Wushuang's talent, and it could even be said that it didn't really matter whether they had this fruit of luck. They believed that Jian Wushuang would definitely be able to ascend the realm of Dian Immortal for no more than a year. This fruit of luck is just an advancement of the established facts. Seeing Jian Wushuang's breath continuously circulating, and the various great auras circulating each other, Jiang Lian didn't relax either. Work together to set an enchantment and guide the air transport in another fruit to him. The luck in this fruit is so great that it makes the immortal body a bit difficult. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's spirit and thoughts were united, guiding the air luck in the limbs and hundreds of skeletons, and jointly attacking the non-existent obstacle. Time passed by, shaking the chi luck for 9 days, and all began to return to his body, and then all the visions disappeared. And Yan Fan, who was watching this scene nervously, was slightly startled. It's over? Jiangli frowned slightly, obviously also a little puzzled. After a while, Jian Wushuang also slowly opened his eyes, and a touch of disappointment flashed deep in his eyes. Yan Fan said nervously, What, how is it? He smiled bitterly and shook his head. I still failed. Fucking, I knew that old boy and Songting was unreliable. I will uproot this tree now. Yen returned angrily, then turned around to pull the tree. Guan, what's the matter with me? I only provide the fruit, but it doesn't guarantee that he will rise steadily. The fairy giant tree shivered, almost shaking. At this time, Jian Wushuang also took action to stop Yan Fan. It's really nothing to do with it. That fruit does contain the fortune that can be improved, but this is my own reason. But, he hesitated to speak, then stopped, and finally said, It's okay, or you can break through by taking a few pills. Hearing the words, the fairy tree said in a low voice, I have given you all the last 2. I don't have any. Yan Fan snorted coldly. Is it not your decision but my decision? The fairy giant tree sighed, and then said very angrily, I live in a corner, just want peace of mind to enlighten the Tao and bear the fruit. Why do you always seize my Tao fruit? A tree will not be fruitful if you honestly bear fruit, so there is so much emotion. Yan Fan whispered, Hurry up and give me 5 more fruits, and we will leave. Where do I have so many fruits? In addition to you, a strong man came not long ago, wounded me, and took away a tau fruit from me, plus the 2 in your hands. It's all mine. The fairy giant tree wailed, and after a long sigh, he said nothing. But Jian Wushuang, who was standing by the side, suddenly seemed to realize something, and suddenly raised his head to look at the fairy giant tree. What did you just say? Other Dian immortals visited you not long ago? What does he look like? Are his eyes red gold and 9 colored feathers between the tips of his hair? After a long silence, the fairy giant tree said again, How did you know? Are you accomplices with him? In his mind was like a 9-day thunder, and Jian Wushuang's heart was like beating a drum. What he described just now is exactly the appearance of Diqing. Right now, under this misunderstanding, he actually learned of Diqing's whereabouts. How did this make him unexcited? Then tell me, where is he now? Jian Wushuang asked anxiously. I don't know calm but can feel that he has not gone far, otherwise he knows nothing. The fairy giant tree said, and then continued to silence. He stopped asking, but quickly thought about it. The news he got from the fairy tree proved that Diqing had been here not long ago, and Jian Wushuang and the others were probably still in the plane of heaven and land. The distance between them was no less than half a year, but with the strength of the ninth-ranked Dian immortal, he could definitely walk a considerable distance. But the fairy giant tree felt that Diqing had not gone far, so it was very likely that Diqing should have been severely traumatized, and thus found a safe place to hide. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate anymore, and turned around to look for Diqing's whereabouts. How about it? Do you know the whereabouts of your friend? Yan Fan asked in a condensed voice. He nodded. It is very likely that he has not left here. I want to find him as soon as possible, so as not to make waves again. Yan Fan nodded. Okay, then we will go along with you and protect your safety. Chapter 4975. Leaving from the land of immortal bones in the realm of no sea, Jian Wushuang finally sighed, unable to hide his loss. He swallowed a hunyuan without sea dao fruit, and he did not have any breakthrough in his realm. The supreme air luck contained in the fruit was only divided and absorbed by the 3 great roads, and failed to break through the realm at all. In other words, Jian Wushuang could no longer break through, and the realm of Yinxian was his ultimate destiny. Without a source of immortality, he has no possibility of being promoted to the realm, and his highest realm from now on will only be the immortal. This is undoubtedly fatal. Even if Jian Wushuang can now kill rank 3 Dian immortal, even in the state of Sandao, he can kill rank 6 Dian immortal, but this can't change his upper limit. The highest limit is immortal yen. In the future, when facing rank 9 Dian immortal, he will only end up being easily killed. Could it be that all of this really cannot be changed? The Tao fruit that the giant tree bears contains the supreme air luck that is too terrifying, enough to allow a fairy to climb into the realm of Dian. It was precisely because of this that Jian Wushuang became more worried. He couldn't believe that he would actually be trapped in Yinxian, and he could no longer make breakthroughs. The realm of Dianxian was already in sight. Perhaps it was the loss of Jian Wushuang's eyes that Yan Fan reached out and patted him on the shoulder, and then said grinningly, This must be the problem of that and fruit, master. I still like you as always. You will definitely be able to visit Dian Immortal in 2017. I think it took Jiang Li and Jiang Li to be promoted to the realm of Dian Immortal for a long time. After all, promotion to Dian Immortal is not that simple. Jiang Li also raised his eyebrows and smiled. Yan Fan is right. You will be promoted to Dian Immortal in at least 1 year, because you are much better than us. Immediately afterwards, Yan Fan gave him the last remaining Qi Luck Dao fruit. Today is indeed too hasty. Once there are signs of a breakthrough in the future, I will eat this fruit, and I will definitely break through once. Seeing the Tao fruit in his hand that was completely wrapped in Yanli, and had no luck at all, Jian Wushuang's heart was extremely warm, and then he solemnly thanked him. Okay, you can't be so polite to us from now on. These are all the duties of a master. Yan Fan still said with a smile, The top priority now is to find your friend first. He nodded. and then a group of 3 people rushed to the distant sea of no edge. The so-called endless sea is endless, and even dying immortal can be lost in it. And the difficulty of finding a dying immortal in this one can be imagined. Judging from the perception ability of the fairy giant tree, I am afraid that it will take a long time to find the truth in the next time. But Jian Wushuang still decided to find Di Qing. No matter how long it took, after all, Di Qing was banished in the sea of no edge because of himself. With the continuous advancement, the sea of boundlessness returns to dead silence and coldness. Jian Wushuang was thinking about some issues as he walked forward. It has been a long time since he entered the sea of no edge. Although he has gone through several battles, he still feels that the dying immortal who is trapped in the endless sea does not seem to be as sinful as he imagined, and it can even be said that it is impossible to be exiled. Especially Jiang Lian's return to these 2 sword immortals, as well as the Guangyue immortal in the Guiwei immortal palace, the Tsangting immortal, and a kind of white-robed dying immortal. None of them have the bloodthirsty violence. Some are just pure. These detached true shackles, and even the strongest ones who can compete for the emperor's luck, are now exiled in the sea of no edge. Jian Wushuang guessed that all of this was most likely the exile led by Zhen Wuyang, after he ascended to the throne of the emperor. Just when he couldn't help but want to ask some questions, the endless waters in the distance suddenly swept up to kill. Yan Fan frowned. It's really a bunch of guys. During the time I was asleep, the Sea of Borders has been so messy? Jiang Li also said, you have slept for so many years, this place is already messier than you think. Then simply kill it, not see and not bother you. He said again, his palm already quietly holding the hilt of his waist. In this short moment, all those murderous breaths rushed in. There are a total of more than 20 figures, like a dark stream. And these figures are all chasing the front figure at this moment. After a short while, a voice that was almost astonished by the soul came from a distance. The hero ahead, help! Jian Wushuang's eyes condensed slightly, and the majestic power was already gathered between his palms. With the sound resounding, a skinny figure, wearing a sloppy and incomparable Taoist robe, came behind Jian Wushuang in an instant, and then disappeared strangely and inexplicably. The remaining 20-odd people, surrounded by terrifying body shapes, stopped directly in front of them. Each of them was actually a third-ranked dying immortal. Hand over the evil thief. The leader, Dian Xian, said in a cold voice, directly releasing Yanlipi training and surrounding Jian Wushuang's 3 people. If you don't call out, don't blame us for being polite. Jian Wushuang shook his head secretly, sighed, and did not speak again. If these dying immortals had asked in a good way at first, it would really be possible to know the whereabouts of that guy. But now, there is only one dead end waiting for them. Yan Fan didn't even bother to draw his sword. He waved it casually, and hundreds of strong sword intent burst out, strangling them all into pieces. It only took a few breaths from speaking to it, until it was all broken into minced meat. Sword intent returned to 1, Yan Fankai said in a cold voice, noisy. Regarding the enemy, or potential disadvantages, he simply shot even far beyond Jian Wushuang's imagination. However, the strongest person who can survive in the age of the ancient times, I am afraid that there is no softest place in his heart. Waved and wiped out more than 23 turn dying immortals, and turned them into powder. Yan Fan immediately looked at Jian Wushuang. And Jian Wushuang also said coldly at this moment, if you hide again, you will definitely end up not much better than them. After a moment of silence, a voice that could not contain fear suddenly sounded. The 3 fairy monarchs are forgiving, and the old Daojiang parade is here to thank the 3 fairy monarchs for their virtue. The space was rippling, and the figure that had originally disappeared knelt directly in front of Jian Wufang, his 5 bodies thrown on the ground, shaking like chaff. Seeing this scene, the murderous Jian Wushuang had already begun to attack, but he said in a cold voice, why do you want to bring disaster to us? Are you afraid that we will also kill you? Chapter 4976. The sloppy Taoist who claimed to be the old Daojiang parade. His five-bodied body was directly shocked, and then he shook and wailed. The three immortal monarchs don't know something, and the little old Dao is also forced to be helpless. It is really desperate to be intercepted by them, so they have to ask for refuge. If the three fairy kings are still extremely angry, they can destroy the little old Dao at any time. Kill. After Jian Wushuang and Jiang Lian looked at each other, they said coldly, leave. Thanks to the three immortal monarchs and virtues. The sloppy Taoist bowed heavily, and then climbed up from the void with gratitude. Only then did Jian Wushuang see the true meaning of this old way. A shaggy and withered hair was arbitrarily pulled behind his head by a bone hairpin, revealing a face with sunken eye sockets and dry yellow, and the two-faced 8 character, who added a bit of wretchedness. And under the open robes, a pair of bare ribs made Jian Wushuang a little doubtful about how this guy lived until now. Yan Fan curled her lips, and then turned around to leave. Just when they all set off to leave, the old Daojiang who was standing there, and did not intend to leave, suddenly said, "Three fairy monarchs, what do you have to do? Leave if you don't want to die." After Jian Wushuang left this sentence without looking back, he set off. And the Lao Daojiang parade seemed to be hesitating. After a while he gritted his teeth and said, "The three fairy monarchs and Xiao Lao Dao have traveled here for several years. They know any place. If necessary, I am willing to follow along." Jian Wushuang quietly stopped. In the next moment, 36,000 sword intent burst out from him, directly strangling and marching towards the river. Seeing the terrifying sword intent coming over the sky, Lao Daojiang did not flee in a hurry in the parade, but closed his eyes and motionless. The sky is trembling, and the sea of no edge has set off waves of great magnitude. Time seemed to stagnate. At this moment, the 36,000 sword intents did not slash towards Jiang, but hovered in front of him. Thousands of sword intents became one afterwards. Jian Wushuang came to him, reached out and grabbed the collar of his Taoist robe, and lifted it up. "What is your purpose?" Jiang Yugong even said something unfavorable. I have no purpose. Just want to report the life-saving grace of the three immortals." "No, if you're talking more nonsense, the sword is on your body," Jian Wushuang said coldly, and then threw it away. Jiang Gang was dumb, and finally murmured, "But I." Jian Wushuang, who turned around and was about to leave, stopped and said in a condensed voice, "How sure are you to find a Dayan immortal in this borderless sea?" He was taken aback, and quickly reacted and said, "It is difficult to return to Xianjun, but if the conditions are to be included in this area, it should not be a particularly difficult thing, because here is where Yin Xian can stay. Not many, and I just happen to know. Who does Xianjun want to find?" Jian Wushuang stopped paying attention to him. "Don't ask so much if you don't know, just follow us." Above the boundless sea, the sloppy old Daojiang parade closely followed Jian Wushuang. At the same time, he waved his hand to take out something from the tattered Taoist robe, and then threw it above the sea. It rose hundreds of feet in the storm, forming a true treasure ship. The three immortals are going to board the Real boat. In order to avoid some unopened Dayan immortals from disturbing the itinerary, it is the best choice to travel by boat. Jian Wushuang did not hesitate too much, and then took Jiang Lian back to board the ship. In a flash of millions of miles, the true treasure ship shuttled at an extremely fast speed. Jiang Gongju sat on the bow of the ship, and concentrating on controlling the direction, Jian Wushuang walked forward and asked, "Have you ever seen a 9-ranked Dayan immortal who has been traumatized, and has 9 colored feathers in his hair?" "I haven't seen it before. But in the next sea area we arrive, there should be the one Xianjun wants to find," Jiang Gang said very simply. Jian Wushuang was not too disappointed when he heard this. After all, the news about Diqing was too small for this boundless sea. "Don't worry, if your friend is going to suffer some trauma, he won't be too far away from here. Maybe he can find it in the next place." Yan Fan patted his shoulder and comforted. Jian Wushuang nodded, and the only thing left to do was to look for it with Jiang Gang's guidance. However, after shuttled out of the vast sea, Jiang Parade, who was concentrating on manipulating the real ship, suddenly changed his face. No, there is something wrong ahead. As his voice fell, the vastness of the sea surface suddenly shook, as if there was a terrifying existence under the sea awakening. Hundreds of thousands of feet of dust surged up, like a heavenly gate rising from the sea, terrifying to the extreme. An unimaginable oppressive force squeezed in, and this sea gate composed of billions of meters of dust completely surrounded the Swordsman ship. At this moment, even the sky was dimmed. Standing at the bow of the ship, apart from Jian Wuxia, Zhang Lian's face was solemn, and the palm of his hand was already quietly gripping the hilt of the waist. How could there be such a strange phenomenon? And there is still an immortal Yen who can control this sea area. Yan Fan murmured, and then looked at the river parade sitting on the bow. But he quickly denied that it was Jiang Parade who was causing the trouble. After all, a mere rank 6 Dian immortal could not get over such a big wave. And Jiang Gang said in a trembled voice at this moment, "My dear princes, what shall we do next?" Yan Fan ignored him but looked at Jian Wuxia. "You will be behind us later. Remember not to get in the water." Jian Wuxia nodded. His whole body has quietly condensed an invisible general trend. At this moment, Zhang Lian is all ready to go, is ready to cut off the sea. There is almost no possibility of evading the Tianmen Sea screen, which is hundreds of millions of feet high, and can only choose to resist. When all of them were extremely solemn, only the old Dao Jiang, who was lying on the bow of the ship, showed an unusually calm complexion. At this moment the Tianmen Sea curtain, which is billions of feet high, is smashed down at this moment. It was as if the mountains and seas were about to fall. The terrifying general trend was like facing the siege of thousands of Dian immortals, making Jian Wuxia not slacking off. But the next moment something changed suddenly. Jiang Parade, who was originally lying in the boat, suddenly swooped down on him, yelling, "There is a change in the sea of boundlessness, and none of us can escape." And until this moment, Jian Wuxia suddenly realized that this terrible and curious scene was not a real existence, but an illusion. Such a heavenly illusion actually deceived them all. "You old dog, I can't forgive you." Jian Wuxia was so angry that he couldn't add up. Chapter 4977. But despite the sound of his anger resounding, he was swallowed by the roar of the waves like Hongzhong Dalu. Boom! Amidst the billions of meters of dust, the sea curtain of Tianmen blasted down. At the next moment, the horrible scene expected did not appear. The moment the Tianmen sea screen, which is more than billions of meters tall, crashed down, it disappeared. Everything is like a mirage, like a dream, like nothing happened. Only the mist convoluted by the dust waves spewed out, full of the breath of death and desolation. Jian Wushuang put down the palm that was blocking his eyes, and then looked forward. The sea is calm and silent. There is no other horrible scene before. Damn, it's an illusion? Yin Fan said in a deep voice, his eyes cold. Jiang Li also had a solemn expression, and the two sword immortals were also bewildered by this illusion. Jian Wushuang then retracted his gaze, and hurriedly looked at the ship. But apart from the three of them, there is no other figure in the boat. The sloppy old Daojiang parade disappeared without a trace. Not even a trace of it, as if it had never appeared before. Damn old thing, he really caused this illusion. Yin Fan said bitterly. I've noticed something wrong with him. Jian Wushuang was puzzled. But why did he do this? Willing to take the risk of being suspected? Jiang Li seemed to remember something. His expression slightly changed when he looked at him. Let's see if there is anything missing on you. Jian Wushuang was stunned when he heard the words, and then subconsciously touched his waist. The Boyang bottle containing the true shadow of the three emperors was still there. Not only was the Boyang bottle still there, but also the golden jade ring and some other treasures, all lying quietly in his arms. Everything is still there. What is this guy's calculation? Jian Wushuang whispered. Suddenly he remembered something, and hurriedly touched his arms again. After a while, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. There is no luck in the fruit. I think it was taken away by the old boy. What? Qi Luck Daogul was stolen. Yin Fan's eyes widened. I want this old thing to die. Jian Wushuang stopped him. This guy's whereabouts are weird. Obviously, he has been eyeing the Qi Luck Dao fruit on my body before. So he set up such a heavenly fantasy to lure us into the bait. If we chase him next, in case we are confused by the illusion again, it will be a big loss because of a small loss. If a mere luck is gone, it will be gone. I have other ways. Yin Fan gritted his teeth secretly. Although it is said that it is really detrimental to the prestige of this sword immortal to be placed by this old thing. If I want to find him, I will definitely thwart him. As he spoke, he hit the edge of the treasure ship again with a punch. With a chick, the hull torn apart. Fucking, this boat is actually made of paper? Some embarrassed to leave from the paper boat. Yin Fan was ashamed and almost wanted to lift the entire sea area upside down, catching the sloppy old way. And Jian Wushuang, who was used by this sloppy old way to perform illusion, was extremely depressed. And it was not a small loss that a Qi Luck Dao fruit was stolen. In the final analysis, everything that happened was actually because he was too credulous in the Dian Immortal in this endless sea. In any case, Jiang Gang gave him a lesson. After condensing their minds, the three of them rushed forward again. Not long after, a plane of heaven and land, which was also constructed from the bones of Yanxian, appeared. The heaven and land plane on this side was much smaller than the previously seen heaven and land plane. But when it was different from other barren heaven and land plains, there were fairy trees growing on the land here. The dense forest of fairy trees exudes a strange and calm atmosphere. How about it? Do you want to go in and have a look? Yin Fan asked. Jian Wushuang nodded without hesitation. There are not many land plains in this borderless sea. My friend will most likely be here. Zhang Lian nodded at the same time, and then first stepped into the heaven and land plain. Ha! The crisp cry resounded from the dense forest of fairy trees in an instant, and then a fairy bird with its wings spread out from the dense forest, opened its huge beak, and swallowed Jian Wushuang. As you can imagine, the huge bird head was almost torn in half by Yan's return. Have you ever seen a 9-ranked Dian Immortal with twin red eyes and 9 colored feathers in his hair? Jian Wushuang lay in front of the dying fairy bird and asked carefully, but what I got was a panic shaking his head. Let's go ahead and take a look. Maybe you can find some clues. He said helplessly. Then in the next period of time, this plane of heaven and land was almost turned upside down. All the Dayan immortals that were hit, as well as all kinds of fairy birds and beasts, were beaten violently, and then after questioning, they were allowed to leave. So back and forth, Jian Wushuang and the others didn't mean to get tired, but they didn't get tired of it. They reluctantly stopped until a magnificent flower covered the entire sky and land plain. Immediately after that, an uncontrollable angry voice resounded throughout the wild. Enough, let me stop. This seat has tolerated you for a long time, and repeatedly hurt my seat. Do you really think this seat is muddled? As this resentful voice fell, the huge and dense fairy trees were all swept open suddenly, and then a figure with wings on its back came. Behind this figure stood dozens of figures, each figure exuding a kind of terrifying force fluctuation. They are all Dayan immortals. The figure with huge wings on his back was a woman with a pretty and delicate face. With their eyes facing each other, both Jian Wushuang and Yen Fan looked at other places with a little embarrassment at. There is no other reason. It is that the figure of this woman is too strong, and only the important parts are covered by feathers, and the beautiful figure is enough to see. Jiang Li snorted coldly, then stared at her. Get out of the way. The woman was startled, and immediately said angrily, You actually let me go? Do you know who opened up this field? This seat is the supreme ruler here. Don't you hurt my seat. But now you dare to speak badly? Could it be that it's not going to die? Jiang Li's face was cold, and he held the hilt in his palm to prepare for a thunderous blow. Yen Fan hurriedly stopped when he saw this, then looked at Jian Wushuang and said, Apprentice, ask quickly. Jian Wushuang understood, and immediately asked, No offense. We came here just to find a friend. Have you ever seen a great fairy, who was born with red and golden twin pupils, and 9 colored feathers in his hair? Why should I tell you? The woman with wings on her back said coldly, It's you. You have to give me an explanation first, otherwise you will never be kind. Chapter 4978. Yin Fan put his hands on his hips and said with a face like a hobmeat, "Explain? What kind of explanation? Aren't these all obvious questions? Your subordinates will come up to join in the fun whenever there is nothing to do. Of course, I just tidied up. Is this an account? Besides, I didn't kill them all. I just tried to teach you a lesson or two. It's enough to save you face." You. The pretty woman with wings on her back was speechless for a while, and her silver teeth stared at them eagerly. Her extremely large-scale chest was ups and downs, and she seemed to be enduring strong anger, but she did not make the next move. She has a strong and clear intuition that none of the three body shapes at the moment are good. I am afraid that the entire Tianlu powerhouse will suppress it together, and they will not necessarily get the desired result. After a while, the pretty woman with wings on his back said in a deep voice, "Let's go. I'll take the blame for what happened just now. I just ask you to stop taking a step in this area." Yin Fan did not speak, but looked at Jian Wushuang. He then said slowly, "We really only wanted to find a friend when we came here. The previous thing was indeed that we did not do it right, but if we didn't do that, I'm afraid we would have been besieged long ago. Needless to say, you can go." The pretty woman said coldly. She just wanted to invite the three evil spirits away. Jian Wushuang didn't say much either. After nodding his head and agreeing, he finally said, "If you have ever met my friend, please let me know." After speaking these last words, they were about to turn around and leave. At this moment, the pretty woman with wings on her back suddenly said, "What is the relationship between the guy you just described and you? Why are you looking for him?" Jian Wushuang stopped walking and turned to look at her. "You know? Answer my question first," she said in a deep voice. Jian Wushuang said, "He is an old friend of mine. For some reason, he was banished in this endless sea, and I came here because I was looking for him." The pretty woman asked again, "Then how do you prove that you are his friend?" He thought for a while, then shook his head. "It can't be proved, but if you have news about him, you must tell me. He is injured. I am afraid that his actions will be hindered in this sea of no edge." The water waves in the pretty woman's eyes seemed to be considering the authenticity of Jian Wushuang's words. After a while, she seemed determined to say, "The guy you mentioned I know, and stayed with me for a while." Jian Wushuang's heart suddenly shook. He didn't expect to receive the news of Diqing again. "Where is he now?" "I don't know. I asked him to stay, but he refused." A frustration flashed in the pretty woman's eyes, and she continued, "He may not be too far away," saying that he can't find it soon. Jian Wushuang was overjoyed. As long as Diqing hadn't left this sea area, he would definitely be able to find out in a very short time. Thinking of this, he turned around and left without hesitation. Wait a minute. At this time, the pretty woman hurriedly descended from the sky, then put her wings away and came to Jian Wushuang. "Are you really his friend? Otherwise," Jian Wushuang said helplessly. The pretty woman's cheeks suddenly turned pink. "Then if you are his friends, I will go find him with you." At the same time as her voice fell, all Dianxian said anxiously, "Fuyao Xianjun, no, Tianlu can't be unowned." The pretty woman known as Fuyao Xianjun curled her lips slightly, and then said coldly, "Don't interrupt, this seat has its own arrangements." All Dian immortals were chilling, but still looked at her very nervously. And Jian Wushuang was also a little puzzled. "Why are you with us?" The pretty woman was flustered. Her cheeks were even more red, and she stammered, "Why, there are so many I will go with you to find it. Hasn't it expanded the possibility of finding?" Jian Wushuang didn't stop too much, shrugged and said, "Then go." When she heard this, her eyes were filled with joy. "Well, wait for me for a moment. I will go with you right away." Then in the next period of time, all Dian immortals who had negative opinions were beaten by this Fuyao immortal monarch, and the force of the attack was not weaker than Yin Fan. It wasn't until these Dian immortals dared not to refute anymore. Xianjun Fuyao nodded in satisfaction, followed behind Jian Wushuang, and soared towards the borderless sea ahead. Shuttle over the sea, Xianjun Fuyao, who was behind Jian Wushuang, seemed to be thinking about something, and soon walked side by side with him, and asked a little embarrassedly, "Well, can I ask that guy's name? What do you do with this?" Jian Wushuang was puzzled, more puzzled about her intentions. Yes, just want to know you won't even tell this, right? Fu Yao Xianjun said in a panic. He was helpless, Jinjin. Di Qing. What an overbearing name. Her face was reddish, and she muttered to herself. Regarding her abnormal performance, Jian Wushuang was at a loss, but did not pay too much attention to it. After all, the most important thing is to find the truth right now. Immediately afterwards, Xianjun Fuyao said again. Then can you tell me something about him before? Yan Fan answered her this time. I said, little girl, if you ask me so carefully, isn't it because you have a feeling of admiration for the friend of my apprentice? The twitchy posture is not likable. Xianjun Fuyao flushed immediately. What? How can I like it? I just asked casually. Yan Fan smiled maliciously, then was slapped away by Jiang Li. And until then, Yu reads www.akanshu.com's reaction to Jian Wushuang, whose emotional reflection arc was quite long, finally knew why this Fuyao immortal monarch was so concerned about Diqing. It turned out that she had already borne that kind of hazy affection in her heart. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but smile. It seems that the truth of the countless years of being single seems to be close to him. Leaving Xianjun Fuyao's heaven and land plain, the four bodies were like a magnificent streamer, traveling for hundreds of millions of miles. The borderless sea began to truly enter the stage of desolation and silence. In the continuous deepening, above the endless sea, there is no longer any heaven and land plain composed of immortal bones. Jian Wushuang also worries about whether Diqing will get lost in this sea area, making his search even more difficult. Just as they were moving forward, in the endless Black Sea, a waterline followed closely. Chapter 4979. Jian Wushuang, who was walking forward for a while, looked at Xianjun Fuyao beside him and asked, Is there any other heaven and land near your heaven and land plane? She immediately shook her head. It is an unimaginable thing to create a plane of heaven and land in this endless sea. Therefore the sky and land are scarce to the extreme. Apart from the Fang Tianlu that I control, I have no idea. I know if there are other heaven and land here. However, I have also heard that in the extreme north, there is one of the largest heaven and land plains. The far north. Jian Wushuang whispered softly, Is Diqing just there? Just as he was thinking, Yan Fan's somewhat solemn voice also sounded. Be careful, a breath is coming closer to us. Except for the two sword immortals Jiang Lian, Jian Wushuang and Fuyao Xianjun were both strong, and they became vigilant almost instantly. Then, a strong and extremely powerful aura appeared from the sea behind him. Jian Wushuang immediately looked back, and found that the powerful aura was a team of nearly 100 Dian immortals. This team can be called a powerful force. When Jian Wushuang spotted them, the team also noticed their existence. Every Dian immortal in the team wore a wide black robe, completely shrouded his figure in it, the most mysterious. And in the middle of this team, there are 20 or 30 Dian immortals who are dying. Their limbs are bound by the Yanli chain, and they cannot move at all. After seeing the four Jian Wushuang, the team stopped and stood quietly on the opposite side. We are in danger, Xianjun Fuyao whispered, his expression ugly to the extreme. Although she is rank 6 Dian immortal, facing this team of nearly 100 Dian immortals, she has no chance of winning at all. And she can't even escape. But Jian Wushuang seemed extremely calm, as if this team was not enough to be afraid. As for Jiang Lian's return to the two sword immortals, he even regarded them as a joke. In addition to having ascended to rank 9 Dian immortal, they also became such terrifying existences as sword immortal. Even in the face of strong people in the same realm, they can easily be beheaded, let alone these Dian immortals. Jian Wushuang, who didn't want to have trouble, didn't plan to fight, but was ready to leave. But almost at the same time, the black robe team suddenly shot. A chain of Yanli chains that seemed overwhelmingly powerful rushed out of their hands, and then all surrounded them. Xianjun Fuyao's complexion changed drastically, and his mood had fallen to the bottom, and he didn't even have the thought to resist. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes froze, and Yanli went straight into the sky. Facing the Yanli chain that was pressed by layers, he completely released his sword intent. Wuxia Kendo, Zingehohe Jianini the first style. Star. Millions of sword intent swept out. Brazenly confronted. The two collided, and the incomparable sword intent completely burst at this moment. The sky changed, and the Dead Sea raised thousands of feet of dust. The chain of nearly 100 kinds of Yanli only persisted for a moment, and then it shattered. The purest streamer of power turned into endless fragments, scattered on the sea of endless. The chain released by nearly 100 Dian immortals, from appearing to completely dissipating, did not even hold up for 10 breaths. This can no longer be described as horror. Xianjun Fuyao, who had seen this scene in full view, was already stunned on the spot, and was shocked to the point of no more. She never expected that this guy who was just a trivial immortal would send such a shocking thunder. Facing such an extremely violent aura, Xianjun Fuyao just felt unable to resist. A sword cut open the chain of Yanli. All Dianxian took a step back, and then shot to resist the terrible sword intent. Jiang Li and Yin Fan also started at this moment. They shot at the same time. All 6 long swords at their waists resounded clearly. The 2 swords were cut out. The sky collapsed directly. The sea of boundlessness also sank and cracked. And billions of meters of dust was rolled up, making everything chaotic. Nearly 100 Dian immortals all looked up at this scene, and then they were swallowed by endless chaos. The sky and the sea were connected together, and chaos swallowed everything. Under this chaos, even Jian Wushuang was heart palpitated. The sword intent of Jiang Lian's return to the two was so terrifying that the borderless sea couldn't bear their swordsmanship at all, and it became fragmented. The chaotic sky was completely torn apart, the sea area was cut out of a sky moat, and the sea frantically poured into it. This is the full-strength sword of the 2 Nineth-ranked Dian immortals, and the 2 sword immortals, making everything lose its color. The long sword was sheathed at the same time. Yen Fan shook his head. It's really a group of people who don't know how to live or die. Everything has settled, and no Dian immortal can survive the full strength of the 2 sword immortals. But there are always exceptions. Just as the sword intent dissipated, a gloomy light took advantage of the chaos to escape. Want to go? Jian Wushuang raised his brows, and raised his palm and squeezed Yao Rao. The chaotic sky collapsed in an instant, and the figure of a black robe was captured and returned. It was a rank 6 Dian immortal. No, don't let me go. At this moment, the rank 6 Dian immortal was already in a state of dying. Under that sword, his immortal body had been completely shattered, and even Xianyuan might be shattered at any time. Why do you want to shoot us? Jian Wushuang said coldly. The only remaining rank 6 Dian immortal said in horror. No, we just want to catch some single Dian immortals, not against a few immortals at all. Jian Wushuang thought of something. As if he was thinking of something, he said in a deep voice. What is the Dian immortal who caught the single? Throwing them all into the city of exile, fighting each other, in order to accumulate luck for the emperor's emperor. Rank 6 Dian said in horror. He frowned when he heard that, and the bad premonition in his heart became stronger. Tell me where the city of exile is. You reading www.akanshu.com. Xianjun, I can tell you, but can you let me go? Can. The city of exile is located in the far north. You can reach it by walking straight ahead. As his last sentence fell, the fairy body was directly crushed into powder, and even Xianyuan became nothingness. Jian Wushuang retracted his palm. His eyes did not fluctuate. The far north, the city of exile. Diqing, maybe it's there. Gudu. Xianjun Fu Yao swallowed his throat uncontrollably, looking at the 3 evil gods beside her. For the first time she felt a sense of powerlessness and fear in her heart. Now she is secretly grateful. Fortunately, no conflict has erupted before. Otherwise, with the performance of the 3 evil gods just now, her little heaven and land plane may not even have ashes left. Chapter 4980. The gray-black skeletal bones of Xian Xian have accumulated to an unimaginable level with each other, and it is no longer known how many years they have been soaked in the endless sea. They were once the overlords of the heavens, but they have already fallen miserably at this moment, and have become the cornerstones of the heavens and the land. And above this heaven and land, a magnificent and treacherous giant city stands in it. Should I exchange it with the treasure, or leave the luck? In the deep corridors of the huge city made of some material, a small black-robed old man whispered. Standing in front of him was a thin Dayan immortal. Leave luck, he whispered, then stretched out his palm, condensing a drop of fairly pure luck from his palm. The black-robed old man didn't say much. After reaching out his hand to remove the drop of luck, he let him enter the giant city. As the team continued to move forward, the black-robed old man tirelessly collected drops of luck. When a figure shrouded in a large black robe appeared, the originally dirty air was clear. The short black-robed old man raised his head and looked at the black-robed figure in front of him. By instinct, he felt that this was a very young figure. Should I exchange it with the treasure, or leave the luck? The black-robed figure didn't say much, and directly waved a drop of luck. The appearance of this drop of luck caused all the filth to begin to recede, and then fell in front of the black-robed old man. Seeing this drop of luck, the black-robed old man couldn't help but exclaimed, "It's really good. I haven't seen such pure luck for a long time." Leaving this drop of luck, the black-robed figure flashed into the giant city, and the three figures behind him also entered together. This is a huge city, and it is also a city of killing. Dozens and hundreds of Dayan immortals were left here. They were fighting each other, just to leave alive in the end. The Dayan immortal who delivered a drop of luck to enter here did not participate in the fight, and completely acted as a spectator to appreciate this tragic battle. In such a city of exile, all Dayan immortals are already crazy. The Dayan immortal, who had given his luck, acted as a spectator, sitting leisurely in the void, condescendingly watching the Dayan immortals who had fallen into battle under the light curtain. Boom! The huge split wave slashed open, completely slicing a Dayan immortal into pieces. A sturdy body with a dense body of scars, the three-turned Dayan immortal, after beheading two of the Dayan immortals in the initial stage, raised his arms in excitement. But he hadn't been excited for long before he was shattered from behind by a lean rank 6 Dayan, and his body disappeared. Under this chaotic fight, these supreme Dayan immortals have become the most humble existence. They fought wildly with each other, just to finally be able to leave alive. Dayan immortal continued to die out, but then even Dayan immortal came in again. This city of exile is completely a city of murder. After beheading many Dayan immortals one after another, the lean rank 6 Dayan immortal didn't scream, but left quietly like a ghost. He specializes in killing the lonely and declining Dayan immortal, and he is often in no trouble. There are already more than 10 Dayan immortals that have fallen in his hands. Then the thin and ghostly rank 6 Dayan immortal saw a Dayan immortal sitting in the corner with his eyes closed. This is a lonely and extremely weak Dayan immortal. He seems to have suffered a very serious injury. The ground is still sprinkled with some colorful blood, and the extravagant clothes on his body are a little broken. Seeing this scene, the thin, ghostly rank 6 Dayan immortal flashed greed in his eyes. He stepped forward slowly, and the fighting behind him seemed to have nothing to do with him. At this moment, there was only the mysterious Dayan in front of him. But when he was about to approach, the mysterious Dayan Xian quietly opened his eyes. Profound red gold, with unparalleled prestige, just staring at each other. The skinny and ghostly rank 6 Dayan was desperate. He could clearly feel that it was an existence he couldn't compare. Rank 9 Dayan immortal. The absolute existence of Dayan immortal realm is simply impossible to contend. The difference between rank 9 Dayan immortal and monarch is that the emperor controls the emperor's luck, but they don't. Escape. This is the only idea in his mind, but there are always ideas that cannot be realized. The thin and ghostly rank 6 Dayan immortal only felt that the immortal body could not move at all, and a deepest level of fear completely surrounded him. Then the Dayan immortal sitting on the ground slowly got up. His heroic and pure face was covered with frost. A total of 9 magnificent colorful feathers surging between the tips of his hair, exuding a general trend that cannot be seen directly. Let it go, let me go. I have no intention of being an enemy of you. Rank 6 Dian Immortal was terrified to the point where it could not be added, but this was only his last word. At this moment, huge and magnificent 10-party wings suddenly burst out from behind him, dispelling all filth and blood mist. The brilliant glow from his body illuminates the entire city of exile. All the Dian Immortals who were fighting each other, and the Dian Immortals who were sitting above the void, watching this scene from a condescending position, held their breath and looked at that figure. The filthy power retreated, and there was no trace of blood mist that could soak his fairy body. Facing the tens of hundreds of Dian Immortals in front of him, there was no fear in his eyes, even a little disdain. Then he reached out and took something out of his arms. It is a D-Pin pill. The last Emperor Pin pill can restore him to his heyday in an instant. He stagnated for a moment, then sent Dan Maru into his mouth. The mighty and magnificent Huameng shot out with him, as the center at this moment, shining the entire city of exile, from the ancient times to the present, has grown to an unimaginable point. This extremely filthy city of exile, let him destroy it. The wings of the 10 directions shook suddenly, and the feather curtain composed of countless pure golden feathers shot out, making all the Dian Immortals in front of them irreversibly destroyed. There is a fragile body of the Dian Immortal, whose realm is the initial realm. They died on the spot, and even before they wailed, they disappeared without a trace. As for the fate of rank 3 Dian Immortal cannot escape the destruction, only rank 6 Dian Immortal barely dodges, looking at him with fright. Shifang's wings are moving in a regular rhythm, and with each rhythm, they can harvest the lives of several Dian Immortals. At this moment, even the Dian Immortals who were sitting in the void as spectators, all had cold hands and feet, as if they were on the scene, feeling the cold killing intent. The city of exile, which had been fighting wildly, was now one-sided. Under the strangulation of the Qijin Jinyu, no Dian Immortal could bear it. Chapter 4981. At this moment, all the Dayan immortals who had been killed in the city of exile gave up fighting and fled in panic. This entire unimaginable giant city was shaken, and it began to become a little shaky. Rank 9 Dayan immortal. Here is the master. All Dayan immortals dare not even stand up. They can only run wildly for their lives. But this city of exile has no outlet for them. They can only be killed or killed, and only those who survive in the end can leave. And right now the most tragic one-sided killing is going on in this city of exile. For some Dayan immortals in the initial realm, they couldn't even make a sound. They turned into a cloud of blood. Only at this moment, there were more than 20 dead Dayan immortals. Everything is shrouded in chaos and horror. And the Dayan immortals, who were sitting on the void, overlooking the city of exile, turned from initial panic to hysterical excitement. It is equivalent to being imprisoned on this plane of heaven and land. The Dayan immortals who have been for countless years can only be regarded as lingering alive. Their fairy is long gone, like a body that has not been pursued, and only a tragic battle can awaken their memories. Especially watching the continuous fall of Dayan immortals, they all became hysterical and excited. Kill, kill, kill. The scream that almost collapsed the huge city resounded. The wings of the 10 directions bloomed completely, and almost half of the city of exile was swallowed by an unimaginable general trend. His face was stern, as if he was above the realm of heaven, and he was punishing him. He is Diqing, the truth of the heyday. Under his wrath, the black Wuboxiang, the white Wuboxiang, the golden Wuboxiang, and the 3 real-life treasures came out together, completely letting all the Dayan immortals who were killing them in despair. The black Wubao screamed wildly, and as soon as it spread its wings, it swallowed the digital Dayan immortal. The Baiwu Baoxiang cleared, and its huge treasure directly turned into countless white awns, confining all the escaped Dayan immortals in the domain. The golden crow and treasure shook. It waved its huge golden wings and lowered endless golden feathers. Under this veil, all the Dayan immortals on the run were burned. Nearly 40 Dayan immortals were reduced to ashes within a few dozen breaths. This was an unimaginable scene, so that the Dayan immortal who was thrown into the city of exile was slaughtered to death. Qijin Huameng hovered around Diqing, dispelling all filthy blood mist. He seemed to have walked out of the ancient times with some unknown luck. When the city of exile was completely dead, there was only one figure standing right in the center. The Sanwabeo phase disappeared, and Diqing returned to peace. In the city of exile, apart from him, there is no other Dayan immortal standing. All the Dayan immortals who participated in the killing seemed to have evaporated, and there was no trace at all. Diqing Ning stood there, looking at the dim light curtain above his head. He knew that the exit from here was above. Just when he was about to do it, the light curtain was suddenly opened, and then a powerful figure entered the city of exile. Nearly 100 physiques, nearly 100 Dayan immortals. Every Dayan immortal is actually at the lowest level of the third revolution. The moment they entered, they all locked the truth. The power that was terrifying enough to shatter the heavens was all released at this moment. Seeing Dayan immortal who kept moving closer, a wave of fluctuation flashed in Diqing's eyes. The Emperor Pin pills did restore him to his peak state, but this was not enough to keep him fighting. As an ancestral golden crow, he has given birth to 9 true lives up to now, and is called the immortal golden crow. And every time the undead golden crow loses a true life, it has to enter a long slumber to stabilize the fairy source. But Diqing had lost 2 true lives, and he should have entered a long sleep to stabilize the source. But he did not sleep, which inadvertently hid hidden dangers. Once his 3rd true life is gone, his 9th rank will no longer be guaranteed, and he will fall into a long and endless sleep. In the face of these nearly 100 Tier 3 Dayan immortals, this 3rd true fate is bound to fall. But he is inevitable and can only challenge. The violent force broke out again, and the violent degree even made the entire city of exile shake more violently. It seemed that it might be broken at any time. This battle is even more terrifying than the first battle. All Dayan immortals who entered the exile city did not kill each other, but all rushed towards Diqing. Yanli is magnificent, covering everything. Above the city of exile in the endless void, a black cloud that was so thick that it could not be melted was slowly burning, as if overlooking this scene. And behind this black cloud, more than a dozen figures dressed in large black robes stood quietly, surging with terrifying momentum. After a while, a deep and hoarse voice came from the black cloud, forcing all his air luck out. I can feel the strongest air luck in his body that does not belong to him. A group of black robe figures promised, and then all turned into a cloud of smoke, disappearing. At the same time, the light curtain covering the city of exile was suddenly opened, and black robe figures entered quietly. Jin Wu Baoxiang was directly torn into pieces by the terrifying power of Yen. This combined with the full blow of nearly 100 Dian immortals, it was too terrifying. While tearing apart the golden black treasure, at the same time, he repelled the truth. The extravagant clothes shattered, and the blood of God gushed from the wound. Nearly 100 Dian immortals were all pressed at this moment, and a chain of powerful Yanli chains fell through the world and tied them to Di Qing's body. Di Qing exerted his strength and shattered the Yanli chains around his body, but then more chains fell, which firmly bound his limbs. In the next moment, nearly 20 ghostly black robe figures appeared quietly, and the first black robe figure came directly to Di Qing's body. He held up a sharp cone that was covered with dense patterns of light and slammed it into Di Qing's chest. In an instant, S power was dissipated, the 9th rank completely disappeared, and his pupils dimmed instantly. Hand over the luck contained in your fairy body. I will let you leave here. Release the sharp cone, the black robe figure said. True fate was declining, and Di Qing was already angered, but his expression was still calm, and his bleak eyes were still disdainful. The next moment, the entire exiled giant city suddenly experienced a huge earthquake without any warning. Then, there was an endless majestic Tianhe, which suddenly tore the void, as if the mountains and seas were pouring down, covering them down. Tianhe is endless, concealing all development forces. The stars and the moon are all in it. All Dian immortals turned their heads in horror at this moment, and then fled frantically. Having closed his eyes, Di Qing suddenly opened his eyes, and an incredible light appeared in his pupils. Chapter 4982. He felt an extremely familiar breath. That kind of breath is Jian Wushuang. The Tianhe is lofty, and the trend is endless. The sword Tianhe, composed of billions of sword intents, approached and swallowed dozens of Dian immortals almost instantly. Cracks began to appear in the walls of the entire city of exile. Seeing that the Kendo Tianhe cover with mountains and seas came under pressure, Di Qing laughed loudly, and then safely closed his eyes. Damn! The black robe was unable to resist the sword intent, and hurriedly fled. Rumble! Everything is gone. This martyrdom, which almost covered the entire territory, lasted for a long time, and the swordsmanship river was completely dissipated until everything was gone. Under this sword, there were more than 20 Dian immortals, who couldn't evade and disappeared. The rest of Dian immortals who avoided, all hid in the corner with horrified eyes and looked around. The ground was plowed and everything turned into scorched earth. Feeling the long river of sword intent dissipating all over, Saiqing slowly opened his eyes, and then his pupils shrank. In front of him stood a figure completely wrapped in a black robe, flowing with infinite sword intent. Then this figure stretched out his hand and slowly opened the pitch-black hood, revealing a beautiful and long-lost face. No Wushuang. Di Qing's emotions at this moment were already beyond the point of being overwhelmed. He had never expected to see old friends in this sea of no edge. And Jian Wushuang showed a relieved smile at this moment, and then said, I finally found you. Di Qing did not speak. He felt a different emotion rise in his heart. This emotion has never appeared before. In the end he said, You shouldn't enter the borderless sea. It is too dangerous here. Danger is coming, but you are still here. He raised his eyebrows slightly, and the sword in his hand directly smashed all Yanli chains. Then, Jian Wushuang swiftly stepped forward and squeezed several D-pin pills into Di Qing's mouth. The entrance of Emperor Pin pills directly saved his true life that was about to fall. Thank you, Di Qing said solemnly. Don't say thank you. Now the top priority is to leave here. Jian Wushuang said, then turned and looked behind him. Nearly 20 ghostly figures in black robes have arrived, and at the same time they have been surrounded by Dian immortal in all directions. Wushuang, you go first, I will block them. The truth that recovered from the weakness has returned to the previous coldness, and the invisible general trend has quietly spread. Jian Wushuang heard the words and smiled. None of us need to move, they can't hurt one of our fingers. Di Qing was startled, and some did not understand the meaning of his words. Although Jian Wushuang was extremely strong, he was still incapable of facing these hundreds of Dian immortals. Leave it all, the black-robed figure said, and with a wave of his hand, dozens of Dian immortals rushed forward eagerly. Facing the overwhelming Dian immortal, Jian Wushuang stood in front of Di Qing, did not even take a step back, and calmly looked forward. It was as if he was waiting for something, until a strange wave of ripples appeared in the void. 3 large black robes appeared quietly, standing in front of Jian Wushuang. The first thin black robe directly raised his hand a little. In an instant, like mountains and seas, endless energy poured out from his fingertips. Under this special fluctuation, the space was directly torn apart, and even the dozens of Dian immortals who were about to rush forward were turned into ashes. Di Qing's eyes suddenly opened to their maximum. One finger kills dozens of places. The lowest is ranked 3 Dian immortal. And it is so easy to write. How is this possible? When he was even more shocked, the endless energy released by that black-robed figure was sword intent. Destroy the enemy with 1 finger, and defeat the army. There are only less than 30 Dian immortals left. How can I see these battles? After surviving, they didn't even have any fighting mood. They all fled in a frantic crawl. The figure of the black robe standing in front of Jian Wushuang didn't seem to have any intention of killing these Dian immortals. He turned to look at Jian Wushuang and Di Qing. This is the friend you've been looking for. Jian Wushuang smiled and nodded, yes. After being stared at by that Qing Rin's pure gaze for a moment, Di Qing felt that the blood surging in the fairy body had begun to feel a little cold. He had only felt this feeling in Yu Chang, who was beside Jin Wuyang. Yen Fan under the black robe heard the words and smiled slightly. Yes, the ninth-ranked Dian immortal. Judging from the performance just now, He is a powerful character. Di Qing was taken aback, and he could see clearly the realm he had deliberately hidden with just a glance, which was enough to show that the black robe's figure was unfathomable. Don't be stunned, leave quickly, lest accidents happen, Jiang Li reminded in a low voice. Yan Hui nodded, and then released the sword intent barrier to cover them all, before leaving here. Immediately afterwards, another black robe figure squeezed Jian Wushuang away, knowing whether it was intentional or unintentional, and came to Di Qing's side. Di Qing was very puzzled, and he was shocked until the black robe figure pulled off his hood. Why are you? Xianjun Fuyao turned red when he heard the words, and then said, Why? It can't be me. I won't appreciate it if I came to save you. I would have known that I would not come. He quickly looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang shrugged, with a subtle smile in his eyes. Di Qing was helpless. For this enthusiasm, Xianjun Fuyao, who had to blend his ancestral veins the first time he met, he held an attitude of keeping away from him. As soon as the injury healed, he quickly left. Never thought that they would meet again here. Many thank you. Di Qing grinned reluctantly, with a somewhat unnatural expression. Fairy Fuyao immediately smiled upon hearing the words. If you know your interest, this girl will take you away. She said that she hugged Di Qing's arm, and was about to leave together. The only exit of this magnificent city of exile is above the head, and you can only leave by tearing open the light curtain barrier. All the surviving Dian immortals gathered at this moment, and soared towards the exit. Jian Wushuang and the others wanted to leave here as soon as possible. But the next moment, the light curtain barrier that was torn by Jian Wushuang's sword suddenly closed. With the closing of the light curtain enchantment, countless strands of dark blue homong resemble a spider web, radiating on the light curtain enchantment, gradually forming a large array. As the four eyes of this big formation settled, a kind of suction like a tarsal maggot descended and enveloped the entire city of exile. The first thing that felt the change was Dian Xian, who was closest to the exit. Almost in an instant, their fairy bodies began to wither and age, and strands of pure white light also rose from their bodies. Chapter 4983. Accompanied by that pure white light lifted into the air. All were swallowed and absorbed by that tricky formation. All Dian immortals couldn't even make a sound, and within a few dozen breaths, they withered and aged to the extreme. Their flesh and blood peeled off, and even the charm that the fairy bones quickly lost turned into flying ash. In just a few dozen breaths of time, they were completely gone. Jian Wushuang and others all retreated quickly, looking at the big formation vigilantly. The entire city of exile was surrounded by a large formation, and after absorbing the luck of dozens of Dian immortals, it became more and more terrifying. At this moment, even Jian Wushuang felt the qi luck in Xian's body began to flow slowly. This big formation, can you even take your breath? Yan Fan frowned. It seems that the master of Feng Tianlu is not simple. It's not easy to be called by Yan Fan. Then the master behind Tianlu is definitely more than the 9th-ranked Dian immortal. Jian Wushuang's eyes were solemn, and he was ready to give his all. At this moment, Yan Fan and Jiangli looked at each other, and then walked forward. With each step they took, the void shook. Facing the huge treacherous formation above their heads, they simultaneously held down the hilt of their waists, and then cut out a sword in an instant. The speed of this sword was so fast that even Jian Wushuang didn't see it clearly, so he cut it out. The void shattered in an instant, and the infinite sword intent was like a blooming fairy flower, and each path reflected an unparalleled trend. Hundreds of millions of Jiani brazenly slammed into the fairy formation, bursting out incomparable huamang. Di Qing was completely shocked by this sword, and hurriedly released Yanli to protect Jian Wushuang and Fuyao Xianjun. The two collided, and the general situation caused the entire city of exile to begin to shatter. The city wall turned into dust and eventually shattered. Even the one who was shattered together was the treacherous array above his head. When the infinite sword intent completely dissipated, everything settled down. The huge and magnificent city of exile has been shattered, leaving only some ruins, and even the void has been cut to pieces. Go! Yan Fan whispered, and immediately released Yanli's momentum to protect Jian Wushuang and the others. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate and immediately swept up together, ready to leave. And at this moment, the original broken void was suddenly shrouded in black clouds, and the retreat in all directions was blocked. The 5 of them were trapped in the most central position. It's coming out with its head and tail exposed. Yan Fan's eyes were rare and solemn, and her palms were attached to the hilt of the sword around her waist, ready to draw her sword at any time. Jiangli was also at this moment, blocking Jian Wushuang without a trace. At this point, the entire city of exile was destroyed, more than half of the sky and land, and everything was shrouded in chaos. Along with the chaos, a thick and treacherous black cloud came to them. It's a good sword intent. You are one of the few guys who can break my formation so easily. An old, hoarse and low voice resounded from the black cloud, and then the volatile black cloud began to change. It continued to transform, gradually transforming into a tall figure, and that fuzzy face finally turned into the appearance of Yan Fan. I appreciate you guys very much. Yan Fan's eyes condensed, and then he said with disdain, "Huh, he's another guy who pretends to be a fool." Heiyun, who was exactly the same body and face as Yan Fan, grinned and grinned. No, I don't like pretending to be gods and ghosts. What I show is the strength I can't control. Furthermore, a sword fairy like you, I have also personally killed it. Only you want to kill this sword immortal? Yan Fan was even more disdainful. I have never seen anyone who can kill me. Heiyun laughed softly. Everyone who can become a sword fairy is unprecedentedly strong, and the power and air luck in the fairy body are more pure. So I like to absorb the air luck of the sword fairy, which is of great help to me. Just relying on you, you want to swallow this sword immortal's luck, so you are not afraid of my head being chopped off? Yan Fan said in a deep voice. He returned to calm. You can't kill me. Even if I don't do it, you are not enough to kill me. Yan Fan's eyes became cold. Why, I want to try. Of course I want to try it. Countless years have passed since the last time I killed the sword immortal. Now I want to try it again. Heiyun slowly raised his arms, his deep eyes filled with excitement. Use your strongest sword. If I am satisfied, maybe I can let you make a living. Yan Fan laughed when he heard the words. His eyes suddenly changed cold at this moment. Old things, you know, there is no Dian immortal worthy of my strongest sword, including you. I like your arrogance. If you are not my food, I would love you to be my friend. After Heiyun finished speaking these last words, he stepped forward. In an instant, the shattered void was swallowed by the chaos, and then wisps of black clouds overflowed from the chaos and surrounded him. At this moment, the terrifying and treacherous black cloud turned into a robe with black gold patterns all over his body. When this black gold robe appeared, the originally chaotic sky began to enter a state of surrender. Therefore, the dissipated masterless power also surrendered. A treacherous order of heaven was constructed in this chaos. At this moment, whether it was Jian Wushuang, Jiang Liyan, and Diqing Fuyao Xianjun, when they saw the black cloud and the black gold robe, their complexion changed drastically. That is the emperor's clothes representing the emperor's luck. And those who can wear the clothes of God have mastered the emperor's luck. Emperor Qi luck, just 4 short words, is too terrifying. So terrible that even the Dian immortal, who can create heaven with a wave of his hand, can't compete with Emperor Qi luck. The emperor's luck, represents absolute control. Under the thought of the Emperor Daangxian's fairy sources, are all things to play with. Jian Wushuang, who had been in contact with 6 emperors, knew more clearly what the emperor's luck represents. Even if there was only a ray of remnant soul left in the heavenly court of the past, Emperor Six Crows was enough to kill Diqing, who was the 9-ranked Dian immortal. The 3 emperors in the Boyang bottle belonged to a different situation. Their emperor body and emperor gas luck disappeared, leaving only 3 weak true souls. But even if the true souls of the 3 emperors were extremely weak, as long as they reshaped the emperor body in the years to come, they would be able to return to their peak state. Once the emperor's luck was in control, Daangxian had already transcended the shackles of the realm and reached a mysterious state. The emperor's luck represents absolute control, and no Dian immortal can cause trauma to the emperor. This also means that when the black cloud reveals the emperor's luck, everything has become a foregone conclusion. At this moment, Yan Fan's eyes changed, as if he had already made a decision in his heart. Chapter 4984. Looking at the dark clouds that had already been added to the emperor's clothing, Yan Fan then calmly called Jiang Li's name. Jiang Li, I'm here. Leave them with me, I will stay. Jiang Li's figure trembled slightly, and then whispered, I'll stay. You can't stay, the 2 of us must leave one. Yan Fan said, his eyes firm and beyond doubt. How could Jiang Li not understand what he was thinking after being a swordsman for countless years? And it was precisely because of this that she was so at a loss. And he also felt the palpitating tremor. She murmured. And Fu Yao Fan smiled when he heard the words. Dimmed. Remember, they all knew what it meant to control the emperor's luck. Whether or not, returned to hand over master's even if it was terrible to the extreme. This is your task. But waiting for him, Jiang Li was already speechless. There could only be one way. As even if he was getting old in an instant, stayed and died generously. He stopped speaking. At the next moment, Jiang Li, Jian Wushuang turned around and then resolutely rushed to the location of broken heaven and land. Thousands of strands of pure followed him without hesitation. At the moment, he made a decision. Turned into a long wind appeared in front of Jian Wushuang and sent them out of the chaotic sky. You can't go. After Jian shattered the chaotic sky in a condensed until disappeared. I can't. He took a breath and looked at the black cloud. Even if we leave together, already dressed in the emperor's clothes, if he doesn't stay, none of us can do without. That builds the avenue of Jiang Li said while looking at him. Yan Fan after a moment of contemplation, you are the guy I am most interested in. I will go back. Don't worry. Do you know what you are about to face? Jian Wushuang did not hesitate. His eyes were cold. But Jiang Li from others stopped him at this moment. From my eyes. You can't save him. Even if you have mastered the emperor's luck, it's like sending him to death. You will not become an emperor. Jian Wushuang stopped at the same place right and said nothing. Your emperor's luck don't be sent to death by devouring the luck of other Dian immortals. Jiang Li's face was faintly cold, his voice calm, and then returned to calm, as if he was telling something that had nothing to do with her. I will become a real emperor today. There is no happy land here, or even in the heavens. The future, and each has its own suffering. Here, after speaking these last words, and then lightly stretched out his sword with his palm, to release a sword and an unparalleled cold light burst out, so that he could no longer make the next move. Heiyun opened his arms and laughed. Everything is bleak. I only need to swallow your luck. Also gave up and then resistance. The luck of those guys. Perhaps as Jiang Li said, it will be time for me to break through here. Each has its own suffering. Yin
but
Fan's
an immortal
face trembled his suffering to perfect a person who wants to be perfect.
You don't
really
always
think
think
they
they
can
can
leave
leave
here,
here,
right?
Tianlu
I
has
just
been
let them go
completely
temporarily,
broken,
kill you
sinking into
first,
the boundless
and then
sea.
find them. Everything
Only
has been
you can kill
swallowed
me?
by the chaos,
he said coldly.
But in this chaotic
and then a
atmosphere,
long sword full of
there is
silver
still a
stripes
figure
and
that
4
is
rays
not
of
tainted
cold
by
light was
chaos.
pulled out.
Zuan
As soon
Hei's
as the
sword
long
intent
sword
is still
came out,
flowing all over
the
him,
chaotic
facing
breath
the black
dared not
cloud.
approach.
He never
At this
takes a
moment,
step
Yin
back.
Fan,
The black
with an
cloud
incomparable
standing in the void
sword
looked at him with a
surging
smile
all
but
over
a
his
smile.
body.
Use
There
your
was a
strength
faint
in
and
chaotic
sword.
atmosphere.
Let me
that
see how
seemed to
strong you
resist.
are.
And
Even
I will
if the
consider
opposite
whether
of him
to
is
swallow
the
your
dark
fairy
cloud
body.
with the emperor's
Yin
luck.
Fan's
He
expression
never had
remained
the
arrogant.
slightest intention to
I said
retreat.
before that no one
I want
can
to
see
kill
my
you
sword,
only in one
not
thought.
even you.
But now I want
It's
to know
so
how strong
ridiculous.
you are.
You know, I can
If
kill
I am
you with a single
satisfied,
finger.
I might use
and
your
it's
fairy
forever.
body.
Heian
said
gave
coldly,
a weird smile.
Really?
And
He
then his
sneered.
arms suddenly rose.
If you could kill me with
and the
one
infinite
finger,
chaotic
I'm
aura
afraid you
escaped
would have
from
done
his
it
fairy
long
body.
ago. And behind it
don't you
condensed
believe it?
into a grand throne.
I don't believe it.
Chaos
but I
is
know
enough
you
to
can't.
overwhelm everything.
Yin Fan laughed.
But at this
with
moment,
6 long swords
Yin
on his
Fan
waist.
was calm to the
At this
extreme,
moment,
and her long black hair
exploded
broke
with
through the band and
unparalleled
flew in the
momentum.
air like a broken
Haiyan's
ancient
complexion
sword
was
fairy.
completely gloomy.
He held the hilt in one
and the whole
hand,
body was
and the
chaotic,
snowflake
rushing
blade
out.
pointed straight forward. Facing the black cloud with the Emperor's luck, a cold and solitary breath burst out from Yin Hu's body. Infinite sword intent, like mountains and seas will pour, brazenly facing each other. The land and the sky are broken, and the sea of no edge has rolled up the dust. At this moment, everything is completely chaotic. At the same time, Jiang Li, who was running through the void, stopped and stared blankly at the boundless void, as if something had gone away from him. Chapter 4985. The huge throne behind him is even more magnificent and overwhelming. Since you want to seek death, then I will fulfill you. Heian whispered, and the endless chaos aura surged from his mouth, rushing towards Yin Fan in fear. Yin Fan, who had been hit hard in the previous confrontation, did not back down in the face of the endless chaos. He raised his sword and confronted forward resolutely. At this moment, the sky reflects the magnificent sword curtain. Each space revealed a pure and mighty sword intent. When the two collided, the most terrifying aura of destruction erupted. Under this aura, even rank 6 Dian immortal would never survive. At this moment, Yin Fan backed away thousands of feet. A trace of divine blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth, and immediately disappeared completely. His powerful sword was enough to kill one Yangxian's army, and even easily crushed the Nineth-ranked Diancian of the same realm, without even raising his head. But now, he was facing the dark cloud that had already controlled the Emperor's luck. Everything was different. The sky-covering sword curtain was easily torn apart, and the chaotic aura swallowed and wiped everything frantically. Facing the chaotic aura from Guy, Yin Fan drew out his second long sword. It was a weird long sword with a blade on one side. It was more appropriate than a straight sword rather than a long sword. At the moment this weird sword appeared, his breath completely changed, his sharpness was reduced, as if he had fallen asleep. As soon as the chaotic atmosphere came, Yin Fan suddenly opened his eyes, exuding a horrifying gesture. At the next moment, he raised the sword in his hand and cut it straight down. Just like the beginning of the heavens and the earth, the turbid air sank, and the clear air rose, opening an unimaginable crack. Under this rift, even this terrifying chaotic atmosphere had to be cut away. Yin Fan yelled in a low voice, and the palm of his hand holding the sword hilt was already under this tremendous force, and the blood was dripping with blood. The robes of his upper body shattered directly at this moment, revealing a solid chest. Then the blood overflowed from every pore on his fairy body, spilling into the void. Facing the chaotic aura with CC Emperor's luck, everything seemed unstoppable. But Yin Fan never backed away, just shook the long sword in his hands, cutting away the chaotic atmosphere. Accompanied by his anger, the sword's strength was open to the sky, It turned out to be abruptly cutting away the breath. The infinite sword intent rushed, and the chaotic aura that split into two pieces also dissipated. Haiyan's strange and inexplicable face appeared, and he looked at Yen Fan with a smile, seemingly satisfied. With her chest rising and falling violently, Yen Fan wiped away the blood from the corner of her mouth, and looked at him solemnly. Yes, you are several times stronger than the sword fairy that I erased a long time ago. You can break my breath with your own power. I start to hope you will be stronger. Only if you become stronger can you arouse me. He Yun's arms slowly raised, and the chaotic emperor seat behind him, which could cover all the heavens, directly soared. It broke through the void, carrying an aura of endless chaos, and went straight to Yen Fan. Heaven and earth became distorted under this chaotic emperor's seat, and a treacherous way of heaven quietly swallowed everything. There was a bit of bitterness at the corner of Yen Fan's mouth, but he was still aloof and cold, like a long sword with a hidden front waiting to be opened. Facing this chaotic emperor, the sword came from his waist. 6 long swords and 6 infinite sword intents clung to Yen Fan's body. They hovered quietly behind him. Their respective sword intents turned into a touch of Changhong and condensed an invisible sword in Yen Fan's hands. The colorful sword body also reflects the general trend of overwhelming heaven. Yen Fan's eyes were indifferent. Even if he was facing a chaotic emperor with the emperor's luck, he dismissed it. In the next moment, he directly led the sword, and the 6 sword intent turned into a Changhong to penetrate the world. Under this sword, the treacherous heavenly Tao constructed by the black cloud was torn apart, and even the chaotic aura that escaped outside was strangled. This is the sword of Jinghong, and the final sword. Under this absolute sword, there is a kendo that has been silent for many years. This is the anger of the sword immortal, with the decisive spirit of burning jade and stone. Seeing this sword, even Heian couldn't hide his surprise, but immediately became more greedy. He was almost certain that if he could use Yen Fan's fairy body for his own use, he would be enough to tear the borderless sea and escape successfully. The Emperor Huang's seat came down, letting all the powers surrender. The sword immortal's Haoxing sword collided with it. This is a battle beyond the realm of Rank 9 Dian Immortal. Even Rank 9 Dian Immortal can't even imagine how terrifying this battle will be. This is the peak battle between the strongest sword immortal and the 9th rank Dian Immortal, who controls the Emperor's luck. If this is not the borderless sea, then just relying on this terrifying aura can easily tear any heaven and immortal territory. Under this battle, the way of heaven is like a child's play, and the majestic brilliance can't even be stopped by the 9th rank Dian. The sword immortal sword collided with the Chaos Emperor seat, and there was no terrible loud noise erupted at all, and no sound was even made. But the void collapsed into a black hole, and became an eternal nothingness. In this nothingness, even the power of growth cannot escape. The void has become a vacuum zone of eternal nothingness. Everything has lost its color, and the void is extinguished and collapsed in large areas. The chaotic emperor seat, which included the emperor's luck, was stopped at this moment, and there was no further. And what prevented it was a sword fairy with a colorful halo. At this moment, Yen Fan was covered with blood, but his fairy body was not damaged or even distorted. He actually withstood the emperor's luck. It is impossible to imagine that with the power of the Nineth rank Great Immortal, it is impossible to resist the impact of the Emperor's luck. But now it actually happened. Even though Yen Fan was already the end of the crossbow, Heian laughed wildly at this moment, with greed in his eyes. He directly waved his arms, and the Chaos Emperor seat that was originally held by Yen Fan's sword sank. The Emperor's luck was even worse. The exhausted Yen Fan could no longer resist, and was swallowed by the chaotic Emperor. Everything belongs to the eternal nothingness. Only under the nothingness, there remains chaos. As the source of the chaos, the black cloud that controls the Emperor's luck has quietly gone forward. He waved away the chaos and looked at Yen Fan lying in the eternal void. Only ecstasy and greed were left in his eyes. Give me your immortal body. Only under my guidance can he break through that shackle. Yen Fan, whose fairy body was broken to the extreme, couldn't even move his fingers, and could only lie quietly in nothingness. The last ray of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. Chapter 4986. The 6 long swords were scattered in nothingness, floating without a trace of charm. And Yen Fan is also fading irretrievably. I don't want to grab it. I just want you to hand over the fairy to me, so that the fit will be the highest. After a moment of silence, Yen Fan slowly said, "Yes, but you have to promise me 2 conditions. As long as you can do it, I will give you the immortal body." Heian asked, "What conditions?" "Let them go." Heian was silent, and then said, "The surging sword
as long as you
can
give up
actually
the fairy
resist
body
it."
completely.
But Heian had
I can
obviously
promise you
lost
to
his
let them go
patience,
and never kill
and
them.
the immortal body
Can.
he had gotten
One more
disappeared
condition?
in vain. Yen
How
Fan
could this
slowly
not make
closed
him
his
angry?
eyes. With
Keep
a
all
wave
my
of his
sword in the
arm,
sheath.
one party
Heian
suddenly
lifted
covered
his
the
eyes
sky
slightly,
and pressed against
but didn't
Zhongli.
say much.
Standing
Just
in
waved
this
the
eternal
6 long
emptiness,
swords that had
Zhongli
completely
was not
lost their
afraid,
charm,
facing
and
the
sent them
endless
into
palm
the
above her
scabbard at
head.
Yen Fan's
She
waist.
just slapped the
"Give
hilt
the
of her
fairy
waist.
to me.
In
I
an
will take him
instant,
out of here."
another 3 long
Yen
sword
Fan
came out,
stopped talking,
strangling
and
away
a ray
resolutely.
of glow began to glow
If Yen
above the
Fan's
fairy
swordsmanship
body,
has an
Heian
endless and
smiled,
endless momentum,
and the whole void figure
then
began to
Zhongli's
approach.
swordsmanship
Once
is the
it
ultimate
merges and
expression
tears
of
the sea of no
majestic
edges.
and majestic.
It is just
It
around
was
the
just
corner.
3 long swords,
Just when he was about
but
to
it broke
swallow
out
the
with
fairy,
an unparalleled
a voice
general
filled
trend,
with real anger
and even the
resounded.
chaotic aura
"How dare
released
you?"
by the black
Accompanied
cloud
by
could
this
not be
real
compared
anger
with
and
it.
loud noise.
But it was this
Heian
incomparably
suddenly raised
general
his
trend
head,
that showed
and he saw a
signs of
rapid
decline
burst of light
when
shooting
faced with the
towards him.
chaotic aura
Because
of the
the
Emperor's
speed is
luck.
too fast.
The 3
When
long
he
swords
wants to
drew up
react,
from the
it is
sky,
too late.
blocking
The
the
light
tendency
suddenly
of the
penetrated
endless palm
his
to
chest,
press down,
and then burst
"Give me
completely.
annihilation." Immediately
Heian was
afterwards,
furious
and
a
waved
crisp
his
scream
hand
that
heavily,
shook the sky and the
accompanied
earth,
by his swing.
enough to cover the
The
sky.
endless palm
Also
directly
rushed
shattered the
forward
sword
and
landed
landed endless
banged on
golden feathers.
Zhongli. There
At
was
this
another
moment,
cry
the
resounding.
remaining 2
and a
swords were
relatively
also
small
swung,
golden phoenix
and a
treasure
total of
came
6
over the
swords
sky,
rose into the sky at the
disturbing
same
all the
time.
breath. protecting
Unprepared.
Jiang Li's immortal
He
body.
Yun's emptiness
The
was
martyrdom
directly
broke out
annihilated
again in the
into
eternal
nothingness.
Quickly, you
Jiang
take
Li
him away, I
retreated a million
stay.
feet.
Jiang Li
Almost
said in
all
a
of the
deep
fairy
voice,
body
in the
was
void
almost
space
torn
that had
apart.
been stirred up
The
to
blood
a
of
little
the gods
chaos.
wetted her clothes.
Jian Wushuang nodded
dripping
behind
down
her,
into the void
then
along the
quickly
corners
took out
of the
more than a
clothes.
dozen D-pin
The 6
pills
true swords
and stuffed
with
them
a
into
full
Yen
blow
Fan's mouth.
blocked an emperor's
Wu
luck,
Wushuang,
which was an
why are you
unprecedented
here?
rumor.
Yen Hu's
When the
divine
infinite sword
consciousness has
intent
been a
and
little
chaotic aura
confused,
disappeared.
even with the death
Haiyan's
of Emperor
strange
Chen
figure
Pil,
appeared again.
it can't be
His
recovered
face was
for a
gloomy,
while.
Mixed
Don't
with
say
some
so
incredible.
much. You have a good night's
He had
sleep.
never thought that the
Jian
two sword
Wushuang
immortals
said
had
quickly,
broken his
and then
emperor's
returned
luck
Yen
one
to
after
Di Qing's
another.
arms.
While furious, there is
Di
also
Qing,
fear.
Fu Yao
Reaching out
Xianjun,
his hand to
and
wipe
Jian
the blood
Wushuang
from the corner of his
disappeared
mouth,
after holding
Jiang Li
Yen
sneered,
Fan's broken
his
fairy
eyes
body,
even more
as
disdainful.
if they had never appeared
If I guessed
before.
right, the
In
emperor's
this
lucky
eternal
control is
nothingness,
running out,
only
right?
Jiang Li stood
And now
with
you
his
can't
sword.
derive luck at
But
all,
then
right?
the chaotic aura
Heiyun
gathered
heard this,
again,
and
once
you
again
read
condensing the
www.
figure of Heiyun.
A Khonshu.
At this moment,
Calm's
he
eyes
can no
flashed
longer
a wave of
suppress the aura of
fluctuations.
anger. So
The
what?
various general
I killed
trends
you in a
that
flash.
came over the sky
Jiang Li
just now
smiled.
did not cause
Then
him
you
the
say,
slightest
how
harm.
many emperor
Only
luck
the
can I
sword that
intercept you
penetrated his
desperately?
chest forced
It's
him
a
to
delusion to go
disintegrate
to hell.
himself.
Heiyun
And
dissolved
angrily,
the terrifying
slamming
power
at
of that
her with his
sword.
palm.
I want
In
your
the
life.
next moment,
Today you have
the thousands
one count.
of emerald
Don't
green
even think
sword
of leaving
intent
one
were
alive
like a
from
blade
my
of
hand.
grass.
Heiyun
Quietly
was furious,
into Jiang Li's
and the
waist,
infinite chaotic
and then
aura
holding
came
her
out
back.
from all over him.
Jiang Li was
terrifying
shocked
to the extreme
until he saw the figure
However,
around him
Jiang
clearly.
Li only looked
He was
at
even
him
more
contemptuously.
Wu
As if looking
Wushuang.
at a pile of
Jian
inflowing
Wushuang
garbage.
lowered his eyebrows.
It's shameful
nodded
to
and
strengthen
smiled.
myself by
Him
devouring
here.
the luck of
After
Dian
she
Immortal.
came back to her
If I
senses,
cut you with a
she
sword,
was anxious.
it is considered
Why are
to
you
have
coming
dirtied
back?
my sword. Don't you know that
Heiyun
all we
looked
did is to
gloomy.
let you go?
You have exhausted my patience. I'll become my nourishment.
I know. But if I
Jiang
leave
Li
like
smiled
this,
disdainfully.
I will be in all
waved
suffering
his palm,
again,
and
really
then a
leave
long
some
sword
regrets.
was unsheathed and
Jiang Li
slashed
was
forward
silent.
with a terrifying
She already
force.
knew that Jian
Looking for
Wushuang
death.
would make a change.
The black cloud burst out, and the chaotic breath swallowed and swallowed away. This was another terrible collision. As Yen Fan's sword companion, Jiang Li, who was even more mysterious, seemed not afraid of black clouds at all.
Chapter 4987. He was determined to move forward resolutely even in the face of the black cloud that controls the Emperor's heavenly way. An invisible sword is condensed from the hand, with the tip of the sword pointing diagonally to the eternal nothingness. Jiangli stood up behind him. Although she was hit hard by the Emperor's luck, she didn't hurt her roots at all. She quickly took out half of the Emperor Pin pill from her arms and put it into her mouth, instantly recovering more than half of her injuries. The overbearing medicinal effect of this Emperor Pin pill has greatly benefited Jiangli, both the 9th-ranked Dian Immortal and the Sword Immortal. You must know that these Emperor Pin pills were all hidden by Emperor Lu Crow before his death, and they were unattainable treasures. The efficacy of one medicine was extremely terrifying. Therefore, Jiangli was very reluctant to eat the whole Emperor Pin pill, but only divided one into two and ate it in half. Although Jian Wushuang gave her several of them when he was just talent, and being able to squander like this would cost more than a dozen of them. I'm afraid there are only alternatives like Jian Wushuang. Seeing the figure standing in front of him without flinching, Heiyun only felt funny, and then became completely angry. When did even Yanxian dare to fight him? A dust-like guy dare to confront me? The black cloud roared, and the chaotic atmosphere surged up like a huge river. Jian Wushuang at this moment had his eyes solemn. He is just the peak of a mortal relation. Even if he can cross the border to kill rank 3, even rank 6 Dian. But at this moment it was different. His opposite was the 9-turn Dian Immortal, who could control the Emperor's luck. This almost crossed a whole great realm, and it was to meet the Emperor's luck. This is an unimaginable and impossible thing. Even if Jian Wushuang once again carried Sandao on his back, there was absolutely no possibility of a battle against Heiyun. The only one who can fight Black Cloud now is the sword of the same realm. Under the powerful medicinal effect of the D-Pin pill, she, who had recovered 90%, quietly stood in front of Jian Wushuang. The 6 swords came out together, turned into a spinning Changhong, swept away, shrouded the chaos that was swallowed by madness in Changhong's sword intent, strangling constantly. Come on. Jiangli turned his head and said in a deep voice. Don't do anything in vain. Remember that you can't die anyway, because you haven't realized our kendo. Jian Wushuang's heart trembled, and Jiangli had already completely regarded him as an apprentice, as he taught the original kendo. I'm afraid I won't be able to lead you to comprehend my swordsmanship, but Yan Fan will know how to do it. You must take it seriously. She smiled slightly, as heroic and arrogant as when she first met. In the next moment, Jiangli turned around and greeted the chaos in the sky with a touch of Jinghong. There is absolutely no possibility of survival. The Emperor's luck represents absolute control. Under that control, even the sword fairy of the same realm can only die. When Jiangli left, it was for Jian Wushuang to win the possibility of leaving alive. He stood there. Only loneliness was left in his eyes. Zuanhei's divine pattern rose from the tips of his hair, and then drifted into nothingness. The straps holding the long hair fell off, and the long hair with a hint of faint gold flew. At this moment, the true shadow of selflessness is added. It represents the guardian way of the universe, the way of killing that represents the great cause and effect of killing, and the unparalleled sword way that contains the sword of the galaxy lake and the sea. 3 pluses. This is a magnificent scene. In the pale eternal emptiness, great luck is blooming. With the eternal emptiness of the true shadow of an ego, put his hands together, his eyelids closed tightly, and a steady stream of luck was circulating. Jian Wushuang stood in nothingness, and a 7-star system bloomed in the space between his brows. The huamang of the invisible sword in his hand has never been so prosperous at this moment, and the 3 avenues of luck are returned to the blade, and it escapes infinitely. Facing the chaotic aura that could even extinguish the eternal emptiness, Jian Wushuang drew his sword up. At this moment, even if he died, he did not regret it. With a true shadow of selflessness, and a sword blessed by the 3 great avenues, it is enough to easily kill rank 6 Dian Immortal. And on the basis of these, what will happen if the sword intent of the word lake is released? The sword intent of lake is the strongest sword in Xinghe Lake. This is a sword that can't even be imagined, and even Jian Wushuang can't believe its appearance. As long as this sword is out, it is the rule of numerology. This is a sword that even the emperor can never stop. Wushuang Kendo, Zingehohe Jianyini 3rd style. Lake. This was Jian Wushuang's strongest time, and Jian Yi was the strongest time. In the eternal paleness, a giant gate appears, the gate of luck. It is so magnificent that even the stars of Tsangyu and the plane of heaven are nothing but a shudder in the ocean. It is impossible to use words to describe the magnificence of this giant gate, but it does exist, making everyone who hears it feel incomparable. The supreme air transport composed of light gold, dark red, and sky blue, entangled into a tranquil lake, flows out of the giant gate of the sky. The pale and eternal nothingness was all tainted at this moment. Within the Qian lake, Songyu stars and giant sun planets are all being born, and all the Qi luck they are born into is one. Inside the giant gate of the sky, the true shadow of the selfless opened his eyes quietly at this moment. Binoculars seem to contain the universe, and all origins are being born. Then Wu Meijinian cried. A drop of tears passed by, like a pity. Jian Wushuang came from Tianmen. Wrapped by supreme luck, it is no longer possible to see his full picture. But the blood of the gods had all rushed out of his immortal body at this moment, and Jiutiani Xian seemed to be a little unable to bear that kind of luck, and began to burn. This sword is unstoppable. In the eternal emptiness, 90% of them were swallowed by the chaotic atmosphere. But at this moment, Jiang Li, who was carrying 6 swords and was already planning to confess to Xian Yuan, suddenly opened his eyes. She felt the mighty breath coming from behind her. That kind of breath is magnificent, with an unstoppable momentum. That kind of aura, even her heart palpitations. In the chaos, she looked back with all her strength, and saw the scene that made her engraved in her heart. It can no longer be described with a sword, as if it is the common fluctuating movement of the entire universe, magnificent and shocking. Then Jiang Li saw Jian Wushuang approaching with a sword. At this moment, no one can compete with him. Even the sword fairy can only be overshadowed. Seeing the sword intent of Qi luck, all the chaotic auras seemed to have consciousness, and they retreated madly. The black cloud, who was grinning, was shocked when he saw this scene. From the bottom of his heart, there was an incomparable heart palpitations, as if he had returned to the endless years, facing the real emperor's anger. No, it's impossible. How can there be another emperor here? I am the master here. I am the only emperor. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.